Chapter 288. A group of Wu family disciples who didn't know what was going on looked at each other in shock after hearing this. The Wu family swallowed other people's auction spirit stones. And even killed them? Everyone's face was full of disbelief. The Wu family relied on credibility. How could they destroy their own foundation? Everyone looked at the family master, Wu Sihai. Under everyone's gaze, Wu Sihai was quite ashamed, and he didn't know what to say for a while. Because only he understood what Yu Qianqiu meant by being ungrateful. They took the risk to bring him to the demon domain to find the old ancestor, but he left them behind. This was already ungrateful. Now he wanted to kill them. Although Yu Qianqiu mistakenly thought that it was killing them and swallowing their spirit stones, if this wasn't ungrateful, then what was? In fact, he didn't know Yu Qianqiu's character. Yu Qianqiu naturally knew that it wasn't killing them and swallowing their spirit stones. It was purely a matter caused by a disagreement between him and Wu Zhengang. However, things had come to this point, and he couldn't take advantage of it by force, so he had to take advantage of it with his mouth. If he didn't ruthlessly bite the opponent a few times and cause some trouble for the opponent, then he wouldn't be Yu Qianqiu. This had something to do with his previous life when he started as a gangster and became an underworld boss. Some of the habits of a gangster would be revealed from time to time. After the three old men standing in the air heard this, their expressions immediately became very serious. The old man in the middle stared down and shouted, "Wu Sihai, is what he said true?" Before Wu Sihai spoke, Wu Zhengang hurriedly expressed his position. "Three family elders, don't listen to this kid's nonsense." What a joke, Yu Qianqiu's words were targeting him. If the three family elders really misunderstood that he had swallowed someone's spirit stones and wanted to kill them, then the three family elders would definitely kill him. He couldn't help but be anxious. "Yu Qianqiu, you misunderstood. If you have something to say, we can talk about it." "You really misunderstood." Wu Sihai smiled bitterly. "Humph." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. "Misunderstanding? If I didn't have some skills, Wu Zhenggang's sword would have killed me. At that time, I'm afraid I won't be able to hear you misunderstand again. Today's enmity has been sown, and there will be plenty of time in the future to settle it slowly. I hope your Wu clan can play with me." "Humph. Goodbye, I won't be accompanying you any longer." With that said, he directly fell through the hole in the roof. "Young man, it's not too late to leave after clarifying the situation." The old man in the middle of the sky shouted in a deep voice. He stretched out his 5 claws, and a 1-meter square shadow appeared in the sky. The shadow took the shape of a claw and clawed down along with the receding green flames in the hole in the roof. F***CK. Yu Qianqiu, who had yet to land on the ground after falling into the house, heard the noise above him. He looked up and immediately let out a strange cry. An illusory 5 claws were not afraid of the blue fire and directly clawed at him. This was the final stage of the crossing tribulation. Not daring to hesitate any longer, he disappeared along with a ball of green flames. The 3 old men exclaimed at the same time. Their divine senses had already locked onto Yu Qianqiu when he fell into the house, but the targets suddenly disappeared. How could this be possible? The 3 of them immediately teleported and appeared in the burnt ancestral hall. The inside was scorched black, and the 4 walls and roof were on the verge of collapse. However, it was empty, and they couldn't see anyone. The 3 of them looked at each other in disbelief. "Wu Sihai and the elders of the Elder Council, stay behind. The rest of you, disperse." A voice came from the ancestral hall that was on the verge of collapse, and the 3 clan elders walked out with gloomy expressions. All the Wu clan's descendants bowed and dispersed. Wu Sihai and the group of elders quickly walked to the front of the clan elders and bowed. The leading clan elder said in a deep voice, "He actually escaped. This is really strange. Wu Sihai, let me ask you, this young man has such a big tone. Who exactly is he? Also, is what he said true?" 3 late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators actually couldn't catch Yu Qianqiu. Everyone couldn't help but think of a legend. It was said that in the past, when Sung was in the late stage of tribulation transcendence, ancestor Qing Fu chased after Yu Qianqiu. In the end, Yu Qianqiu also escaped. After the incident, many people didn't believe it. How could a late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivator be unable to catch a small core formation cultivator? Now, it seemed that it was really possible. This Yu Qianqiu must have cultivated some kind of escape technique. Everyone looked at the three clan elders in dismay. The three clan elders were called Wu Zhen, Wu Bao, and Wu Rui. They were the only three tribulation transcendence cultivators in the Wu clan. Among them, Wu Zhen was the most senior. This matter should have been reported to the three clan elders earlier. However, the clan elders were in a critical moment of seclusion and didn't dare to carelessly disturb them. The matter was like this. Wu Sihai didn't dare to hide anything from the three of them. He immediately told them the whole story honestly. From Yu Qianqiu's birth in Sung, to supporting Immortal Island, to befriending Wu Licheng and the others, to the series of events that happened. Even the hidden forces behind Yu Qianqiu and his group weren't omitted. Especially when he learned about Bai Changchun's information and how he brought the four major clans' patriarchs to the Demon Ghost region to find Bai Changchun, he respectfully narrated everything. Finally, the incident that happened in the Wu clan's ancestral hall was described in great detail. Everyone's heart was pounding. Oh my God! How did we provoke such a person? Meanwhile, Wu Zhenggang's face had already turned green. It would be strange if he didn't regret it. When he recalled that the other party wanted to take his head, he was extremely regretful. Ancestor is actually still in this world. Ancestor's cultivation has already reached the soul formation stage. Ancestor is actually the ruler of the Demon Ghost region. Unbelievable. It's simply unbelievable. The three clan elders were indescribably excited and spoke incoherently. For the three of them, their cultivation was about to face an insurmountable bottleneck. If they couldn't cross it, they would die of old age. Now that there was an ancestor who had crossed that bottleneck, they could ask for guidance. The three of them were instantly filled with confidence. We should immediately pay our respects to ancestor, Wu Rui said excitedly. Wu Bao also nodded excitedly, but Wu Zhen calmed down and asked with a frown, Sihai, are you saying that ancestor doesn't want us to look for him again? Wu Sihai nodded and took out the spiritual treasure sword from his storage bag. He held it with both hands and said, I don't dare to hide it from the three clan elders. It is precisely because many people in the four clans want to set up their own clans, and the one who set up the rule of mutual support was ancestor. After learning from Yu Qianqiu that ancestor is still in this world, I spent a lot of effort to ask Yu Qianqiu to take the four of us to the Demon Ghost region to meet ancestor and ask him for his opinion. When he learned that our descendants had disobeyed his original intention, he was extremely angry. However, he did not want to meddle in the affairs of the world anymore, so he bestowed 4 low-level flying swords to the 4 heads of our families, and asked us to deal with the disciples who wanted to split the 4 families. He also told us not to disturb him again, or else he wouldn't let us off easily. Wu Sihai was able to sit on the position of Wu clan's clan master, so he was naturally not a simple character. He used the ancestor as a gimmick to say what he wanted to say. In fact, after the 4 of them met Bai Changchun, they didn't say much, and Bai Changchun didn't want to talk nonsense with them. This was just what the 4 clan masters had discussed on the way back. This is the legendary spiritual treasure. Wu Zhen reached out to grab it in surprise, but then he paused and asked, since ancestor's spiritual treasure is given to the clan master, it is not appropriate for others to treat it lightly. Sihai. Can I have a look at this legendary treasure? Wu Sihai immediately raised the sword in his hand to receive it. Wu Zhen looked at the 2 people beside him and laughed, then I will be thick-skinned and take a look at the spiritual treasure given by ancestor. As he spoke, his expression became solemn. He took the sword with both hands and examined it carefully for a while. Then he held the hilt with one hand and slowly pulled it out. The treasured sword, which was as clear as the autumn waters, emitted a pleasant sound as it was pulled out. Good sword. Wu Bao, Wu Rui, and Wu Zhen praised. The other elders had already seen Wu Sihai use it. Although they weren't very surprised, they couldn't help but be amazed. After seeing it, Wuzhen injected his divine sense to examine it. Suddenly, he frowned and looked at Wu Sihai suspiciously. Is this really a spiritual treasure? Why do I feel that it only has the power of a middle-grade magic treasure? Wu Sihai smiled bitterly and bowed. Clan Master, you may not know this, but Ancestor asked us, the 4 clan masters, to pass on the ancestral teachings of supporting each other to the next generation. He also used our blood to plant a blood curse on the sword. As for what the blood curse is, I don't know either. He said that people who aren't our blood relatives can't use the power of this spiritual treasure. He wanted us to pass the spiritual treasure and the position of clan master to our blood relatives. Sigh. It's really hard for me to say this. Bai Changchun might have meant that at that time, but he definitely didn't say such straightforward words. Wu Sihai could be said to have used Bai Changchun greatly. As soon as Wu Sihai said this, Wu Zhengang and some people's expressions changed. They opened their mouths to speak but didn't dare to. Wu Bao, one of the clan masters, also frowned deeply. Wu Zhen and Wu Rui exchanged glances. Wu Zhen put the sword back into the scabbard and said, since Ancestor said this, you're just telling the truth. There's nothing hard to say. Wu Sihai, I wonder if I can have a look at this spiritual treasure. Wu Bao asked. Wu Sihai immediately said respectfully, Clan Master, please feel free to have a look. Wu Zhen expressionlessly handed the sword to Wu Bao. Wu Bao pulled out the sword and fiddled with it for a long time. He frowned and said, this sword is really a spiritual treasure? This is clearly a middle-grade magic treasure. Wu Sihai, did you remember Ancestor's words correctly? Blood curse? This is the first time I've heard of it. Why don't you show us this spiritual treasure? Yes, Clan Master. Wu Sihai received the sword with a solemn expression. As soon as he inserted his divine sense into the sword after pulling it out, the sword let out a light dragon's roar. A circle of light rippled on the clear body of the sword. Then, a majestic murderous aura rose. The surrounding people felt their hearts and minds ripple. The murderous aura made it hard for them to breathe. Even Wu Zhen and the other 2 felt uneasy, as if they wanted to surrender to this sword. The sword already had such an aura before it even moved. What would happen if it was really used? Quickly put the sword away. Seeing that Wu Sihai had already raised the sword and was looking for a target to test it on, and that the light on the sword was getting brighter, Wu Zhen hurriedly stopped him. Wu Sihai was stunned. He did as he was told and put the sword away. I'm afraid it'll attract trouble if outsiders see it. There's no need to test it. This sword is undoubtedly a spiritual treasure. Just this aura alone is incomparable to a top-grade magic treasure. Wu Zhen looked at Wu Bao in admiration. The latter frowned and nodded. It's a magic treasure in our hands, but it's a spiritual treasure in your hands. The great ancestor is indeed powerful. He can actually cast a magical spell like the blood curse. Of course. How can the great ancestor be compared to ordinary people? Wu Rui laughed. Wu Zhen said with a little regret, Sihai, what did the great ancestor say? Can you repeat it in detail? Can't we even pay our respects to him? Wu Sihai put the sword back into his storage pouch and said respectfully, before the 4 of us left, the ancestor's original words were like this, there is no such thing as an everlasting clan in this world. This is the only thing I can do. You guys better understand it yourselves. All right. Go back. No matter what happens in the future, don't come looking for me again. Otherwise, I won't let you off easily. What he said was exactly what he said. He didn't edit or embellish anything. The 3 of them pondered over the meaning in his words. They looked at each other and felt that it was a pity. Wu Sihai glanced at Wu Zhengang and said, 3 elders, if we can find someone to help us, maybe we can ask for a chance to meet the great ancestor. Who? The 3 of them asked in unison. It's Yu Qianqiu who was forced to leave by us just now. Wu Sihai saw that the 3 of them didn't understand, so he immediately explained, when we met the great ancestor, he was the one who found Ghost General Meng Yan and Demon King Aoli to bring us there. After meeting the great ancestor, Yu Qianqiu and the great ancestor got along very well. He wanted to leave with us but was forcefully detained by the great ancestor. Since he could meet him this time, he must have a good relationship with the great ancestor. The great ancestor let him come back. Otherwise, how could he escape from the great ancestor's hands? I wanted to ask him again to see if I could ask him to help me. I wanted to ask the ancestor to give us a chance to visit him after a while. However, I didn't expect something like this to happen, and I ended up having a bad relationship with him. However, he has a good relationship with Li Cheng. If we can find him and ask Li Cheng to help us, there might be a chance to save the situation. Hearing this, Wu Zhen and the other two, who had been blinded by the great ancestor's matter, immediately remembered that Yu Qianqiu's matter had not been dealt with. In addition to the possibility that Wu Sihai mentioned, the three of them immediately turned to look at the culprit, Wu Zhengang. Chapter 289. The three elders, Wu Zhen and Wu Rui, were the ones who adhered to the ancestral teachings. Wu Bao, on the other hand, hoped that the four major clans wouldn't interfere with each other. In the end, it was a struggle for benefits. Regardless of who was right or wrong, the conservatives still had the advantage in numbers. Facing the three elders' furious eyes, Wu Zhengang panicked and retorted to Wu Sihai, clan head, since Yu Qianqiu has such a background, why didn't you tell me earlier? If I knew, this wouldn't have happened. Wu Sihai shook his head and sighed, I already told you before. There are some things you aren't clear about. I will discuss it with you in detail later, but you just wouldn't listen and insisted, today? Why didn't you tell the elder council about Yu Qianqiu? Wu Zhengang was a little anxious. Do you really want me to say it so clearly? Wu Sihai stared at him and spoke without any expression. The rule of the four major clans supporting each other was set by the old ancestor. However, a group of people led by Yu wanted the Wu clan to establish their own clan. If someone knew that the old ancestor is still alive, I'm afraid someone would think of a way to stop me from meeting the old ancestor. The meaning behind these words couldn't be any clearer. It was to prevent Wu Zhenggang's group from causing trouble. Wu Zhengang repeated, "You," a few times and was so angry that he couldn't speak. The atmosphere was a little awkward as the clan head and grand elder started to argue in front of everyone. Wu Bao, who was frowning, suddenly spoke, since the old ancestor has instructed again, from today onwards, the Wu clan must not have any thoughts of separating from the four major clans. Wu Zhengang, do you remember this? Wu Zhen and Wu Rui exchanged glances. They both understood that Wu Bao was the one supporting Wu Zhengang from behind. Otherwise, how would an elder dare to go against the clan head? The matter that was supposed to be investigated was easily resolved by Wu Bao's words. Wu Zhengang was saved. Wu Zhengang naturally understood and had a joyful expression. He bowed and said, Zhengang understands. All right, let's not talk about it anymore. However, some things still need to be salvaged. Wu Zhen's gaze landed on the ruined Wu clan's ancestral hall. He frowned and said, "See high, find Yu Qianqiu as soon as possible. Return the spirit stones that were auctioned to him. Our Wu clan can't afford to kill him for embezzling the spirit stones. After we find Yu Qianqiu, whoever offended him will have to make amends." Wu Zhengang bowed and said, "Clan elder, the ancestral shrine was destroyed, and an elder and a few disciples were killed. Yu Qianqiu should be the one apologizing. Do you have the ability to get him to apologize to my Wu clan?" Wu Zhen coldly spat out these words and flew away. Wu Rui also let out a sneer and flew away. The meaning behind his words was obvious. Even we can't catch him, so how can you? Wu Bao frowned and said, "Wu Zhengang, the Wu clan has a clan head. Everything will be done according to the clan head's wishes." After saying that, he also left. Wu Zhengang was stunned. Wu Sihai took a glance at him and immediately made some arrangements. After that, they went back to their respective places. Wu Lixue, who was lying on the couch in the quiet guest house, also noticed the green phenomenon in the sky outside the window. With her temper, she should have gone to watch the show. However, she noticed that some places were destroyed by Yu Qianqiu, and it was inconvenient for her to move around. When she saw that something happened in the direction of the ancestral shrine, she immediately thought that Yu Qianqiu went to look for her grandfather. In addition, she waited for a long time, but he didn't come back. She was a little anxious. Due to her body condition, it wasn't convenient for her to meet people. Thus, she clenched her teeth and sneaked back home to inquire about the news. Wu Sihai and the rest of the clan were all there, and they were still talking about Yu Qianqiu. Wu Sihai was a little worried. He didn't know how Yu Qianqiu would take revenge on the Wu clan. In any case, he had left behind some harsh words. As the Wu clan head, he had to be responsible for the clan. He didn't know where Yu Qianqiu went. He sent people to look for him, but they couldn't find him. It was as if he really disappeared from the Wu clan's territory. This incident confirmed his judgment again. Yu Qianqiu would be a source of trouble no matter where he went. It was very likely that something would happen if he was around. Actually, after interacting with him, he felt that Yu Qianqiu wasn't a bad person. He was easy to talk to when he was good, but as long as there was something that made him unhappy, he could turn a small matter into a big matter. Whether he was in the right or not, it seemed that he was always in the right in the end. After thinking for a long time, Wu Sihai, who was sitting in the middle of the main hall, suddenly sighed and said, "Amazing, really amazing. This Yu Qianqiu seems to be moody and joking, but he's actually not that simple." In the hall, Wu Huagan, Zhu Xuanxiu, and Wu Liqing looked at each other. They didn't know why Wu Sihai suddenly said this. At this moment, Wu Lixue walked in carefully and bowed. "Greetings, grandfather, father, mother, and brother." "Heh. Why is Shui so obedient today?" Wu Sihai laughed and pointed to the side. "Sit down and talk." The other three also felt that it was a little strange. However, when the four of them saw Wu Lixue awkwardly walking to the side and sitting down, their faces immediately changed. Zhu Sunxiu even jumped up. His lips trembled and he could not say a word. Wu Lixue thought that others couldn't see anything, but she didn't know that her grandfather, parents, and brother could see the clues at a glance. After all, her family was full of experienced people. She was still fine when she went out in the morning, but now she was no longer a virgin. How could her family figure it out without saying a word? Seeing that her family was looking at her like this, especially her mother's reaction, Wu Lixue avoided her eyes and asked guiltily, "Mother, what's wrong?" Wu Sihai coughed and gestured to Zhu Xuanxiu to sit down, but the latter didn't see it. Wu Huagan frowned and pulled his wife, saying, "Father wants you to sit down." Zhu Xuanxiu looked at her father-in-law, her chest heaving up and down, but she still sat down obediently. "Our Shui has really grown up." It was so lively at the ancestral shrine today, but Grandpa didn't see Shui go to watch. Wu Sihai forced a smile and asked, "Who was Shui playing with today?" Wu Lixue dawdled for a moment and replied guiltily, "I didn't play with anyone. I just bumped into Yu Qianqiu at the silent guest fort today." Later on, he said he wanted to look for Grandpa. "Oh yeah, Grandpa, where's Yu Qianqiu?" Everyone's expression became more and more strange. Wu Sihai coughed and asked, "Shui didn't talk to anyone else except Yu Qianqiu today?" Wu Lixue's cheeks were a little red, and she nodded and said, "I just met Yu Qianqiu. After that, I stayed at quiet guest camp and didn't see anyone else." She didn't forget to ask, "Grandpa, didn't Yu Qianqiu go to find you? Where is he?" Even an idiot could tell. At this moment, they finally confirmed the culprit that caused Wu Lixue to lose her virginity. It was actually Yu Qianqiu, who killed the Wu clan's disciple and burned the Wu clan's ancestral hall. "Goddamn Yu Qianqiu, I, Zhu Sunxiu, will not let you go." Zhu Sunxiu couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood up and roared. Wu Lixue was a little dumbfounded. "All of you, get out." Wu Sihai shouted, "I have something to say to Shui alone." Seeing that Zhu Sunxiu was unmoved, Wu Sihai said in a deep voice, "Wu Huagan, take your wife away." Zhu Sunxiu wanted to say something, but he was restrained by Wu Huagan and helped out on the spot. Wu Liqing followed behind. When he passed by his sister, he looked at her with a strange expression. He couldn't tell what expression he had. His best friend had slept with his sister. His feelings were complicated. When everyone was gone, Wu Sihai approached and smiled kindly. Shui, don't be afraid. Tell me honestly, are you in a relationship with Yu Qianqiu? Wu Lixue suddenly looked up with a, how would you know, expression. Under Wu Sihai's encouraging gaze, she nodded shyly and lowered her head. Recalling what Yu Qianqiu had said to her, she twisted the corner of her clothes with her fingers, lowered her head, and bit her lips. Grandpa, I'm already Yu Qianqiu's woman, but I'm afraid that mother will, haha. My Shui has really grown up. You're a woman now. Good. Good. Wu Sihai touched her hair lovingly and encouraged her. Don't be afraid of your mother. As long as you really like him, you can boldly pursue your own happiness. I'll take care of everything for you. Hearing this, Wu Lixue's uneasy heart was suddenly relieved. She smiled and said, thank you, Grandpa. However, when she looked outside, she still had a lingering fear. Clearly, she was still a little afraid of seeing her angry mother. Wu Sihai saw her worry and laughed. I'll find your mother now and explain everything. You don't have to worry about anything. Also, it's not convenient for you. Go rest first. Grandpa. I'm going to ignore you. Wu Lixue pouted shyly and awkwardly fled. Wu Sihai looked up to the sky and laughed. Twirling his beard, his eyes glowed as he muttered to himself, Yu Qianqiu, if you have the ability, don't appear. Once you become this old man's grandson-in-law, I want to see you jump into the sky. After escaping from the Wu family, Yu Qianqiu returned to Utopia and immediately disappeared. He appeared next to the underground azure fire and twilight valley of the demon realm and tried to absorb the fire element to replenish what he had expended today. In the end, he did not find any resistance like last time, so he let loose and absorbed to his heart's content. After that, he looked at the underground fire hole and was considering whether he should go down and explore again when he suddenly covered his nose and sneezed. Yu Qianqiu looked around and muttered, damn it. Who's cursing me? Needless to say, it's definitely those old farts from the Wu family. Damn, today is inauspicious. It's best if I don't take the risk. With that said, he disappeared again. Chapter 290. When he reappeared, he was on a small hill outside of Twilight Valley, the place where He Li had brought him to Twilight Valley. He looked around. It was extremely quiet. His foot pushed aside some dirt, revealing a silver orb. Yu Qianqiu smiled and covered it up again. When he had been standing here with He Li, he had secretly kept something up his sleeve just in case something unexpected happened. With a clang, the sword left its sheath and drew a white arc in the air. Yu Qianqiu stepped on it and leisurely flew in the direction of Obedient Island. Was it really leisurely? Probably not. The vast lake was a deep blue, and no one knew what secrets were hidden beneath it. It was a place that not even Bai Changchun could pry into. As the streak of light flew over the lake, Yu Qianqiu's mind was rapidly turning. This trip had delayed him for a few days. He didn't know if Bai Changchun had returned or not. Whether he had come or not, what he should say and what he should do needed to be carefully considered. To him, this was an enormous challenge filled with both risk and opportunity. Between him and He Li, one of them would surely suffer, and the crux would be Bai Changchun's attitude. If it really was as He Li had said, that Bai Changchun really did have some interest in him, then his chances of success in this adventure were rather high. Just the thought of one day reaching the deity transformation stage excited him. Yu Qianqiu let out a long sigh. If I want to obtain, I don't have to be afraid of paying. What's there to be afraid of? At worst, I'll just run. The flying sword accelerated and shot forward with an indomitable will. After arriving in the sky above Obedient Island without any danger, Yu Qianqiu glanced down and was instantly so frightened that his hands and feet went numb and his little heart began to thump. In the open space in front of the house at the center of the island, two people were looking up at him. Bai Changchun had already changed from his farmer's attire into a plain robe and was expressionlessly staring at him. He Li, who was standing to the side, had a very unsightly expression as he looked up at Yu Qianzhou with an indescribable expression. As the saying went, riches and honor came from danger. Yu Qianzhou made up his mind. Hovering in the air, his face scrunched up as he wailed, "Senior Bai, I'm innocent. F***ck." Before he could finish his complaint, a familiar force pulled him down from the sky and sent him crashing to the ground. This time, it could be said that he came prepared. He was not as flustered as he was last time. The moment he landed, his divine sense had already locked onto Jin Zhu, and he could escape at any time. However, he did not do so. At the crucial moment, he resolutely gave up. What did escaping mean? It meant that he might have given up the soul formation stage that everyone in the cultivation world dreamed of, and he might never have a second chance. For the dream that he had been pursuing with great difficulty, he decided that he would not give up until the very last moment of his life. Bang! The figure heavily smashed into the ground, shaking the entire ground. A pool of blood splattered from Yu Qianzhou's body in all directions. The pulling force this time was much stronger than the last time. If it was an ordinary person, they would have been smashed into a meat patty. Fortunately, he was not an ordinary person. His cultivation base more or less had some defensive power. A strong feeling of unconsciousness assaulted him. Yu Qianzhou felt that his body no longer belonged to him. He clearly felt that the moment he smashed onto the ground, the strong pulling force suddenly disappeared. There was even a force that slightly slowed down his falling speed. He only smashed onto the ground due to the strong inertia. It was also at that moment that he once again gave up his last chance to escape. What did this mean? It meant that Bai Changchun had shown mercy. At the same time, it also meant that there was a fleeting hope. The moment he collided with the ground, he smiled. I can't give up my last chance. I absolutely can't give up. Yu Qianzhou used all the willpower in his body to resist the feeling of unconsciousness that assaulted him like a tide. Lying on the ground, immersed in a pool of blood, he raised his stubborn head slightly in disbelief. There was not a single part of his body that could move. Only the sound of bones twisting could be heard from his neck. His protruding and bleeding eyes stared hard at He Li. With an almost inaudible voice, he said, "Senior Bai, I'm innocent." That gaze was as if he had an irreconcilable hatred with He Li. It was as if he would not let him go even if he became a ghost. After saying that, the last thought in his mind was that he would win this time. Yu Qianzhou's head finally touched the ground in the pool of blood, and he completely fainted. That stubborn expression made even Bai Changchun, who had no distractions for more than 2,000 years, slightly twitched his face. He silently stared at the young man who had fainted in the pool of blood. He swept a cold glance at He Li and then looked at Yu Qianzhou. He Li, on the other hand, was frightened by Yu Qianzhou's dying words. He could feel his master's gaze sizing him up a moment ago. He turned around and cupped his hands. "Master, this Yu Qianzhou escaped from Shuntian Island without permission. His death is not to be regretted. I will throw him into the lake to feed the fishes, so as not to dirty this place. He still has a breath left, just leave him here, don't bother about him." Bai Changchun released his divine sense to check on Yu Qianzhou's body. His eyebrows twitched unconsciously. His gaze was a little surprised. He then turned around and walked into the house, sighing, "If the heavens have feelings. Whether he can come back to life depends on his own luck." "I know, master." He Li was a little unhappy, but his tone and expression did not show it. Bai Changchun sat cross-legged in the main hall with his eyes closed. He Li looked at Yu Qianzhou with a complicated gaze, then helplessly retreated. He Li didn't have the guts to play tricks in front of Bai Changchun. Inside the unconscious Yu Qianzhou's body, the golden pearl in his dantian suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light. Waves of warm energy began to flow from his dantian to his limbs, repairing his severely damaged meridians and limbs. Deep into the night, Yu Qianzhou, who was lying on the ground, suddenly let out an almost inaudible groan. Although the sound was weak, how could it escape Bai Changchun's ears? Bai Changchun released his divine sense and quickly locked onto Yu Qianzhou's body, checking on the changes in his body. A moment later, Bai Changchun opened his eyes. His eyes gleamed brightly in the darkness. He didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so heavily injured, yet he only used a short amount of time to recover. This brat didn't do any healing, nor did he take any medicine. His body was actually healing itself. Previously, when Yu Qianqiu had fainted, he had checked with his divine sense. Yu Qianqiu's bones and meridians were almost all broken, and he was barely hanging on to his last breath. Just like what He Li had said to Yu Qianqiu, as long as people came to the demon ghost region, as long as they didn't go too far, Bai Changchun would show some mercy. He wouldn't be as ruthless as he was to demon ghosts, killing them without mercy. But it was this mercy that made Bai Changchun discover the abnormality of Yu Qianqiu. Under the situation where his meridians and bones were broken, he shouldn't be able to use his Jinqi, but something incredible happened. This young man's body had the ability to recover on its own. Speaking of which, it had to be attributed to the mysterious effects of the golden pearl. Bai Changchun discovered that the mysterious power that healed Yu Qianqiu's body came from his dantian. However, with his cultivation, he couldn't discover the golden pearl in Yu Qianqiu's dantian. This left Bai Changchun puzzled. In fact, no one knew, including Yu Qianqiu himself. Every time his body recovered, the purple chaos in Utopia would decrease. Of course, the decrease was insignificant compared to the massive amount of purple chaos in Utopia. Chapter 291. Night had passed, and the sky was turning bright. Under Bai Changchun's gaze, Yu Qianqiu had unknowingly sat down cross-legged on the ground. When the first ray of sunlight shone on obedient island, Yu Qianqiu's body trembled and he let out a breath. He slowly opened his eyes and revealed a look of joy. Just now, he had unknowingly broken through to the core formation late stage, and he had woken up. Bai Changchun's eyes had unknowingly closed again. When Yu Qianqiu saw the person in the opposite room, he was stunned. He recalled the situation before he fainted and quickly checked his body. His body had already recovered, and his cultivation had also broken through to the core formation late stage. However, the vital essence in his body was extremely lacking, and he did not know why. He did not know how long he had been unconscious for, but the fact that his body was not under his control when he was injured showed that he had definitely been severely injured. For him to be able to recover to this state, it was definitely due to the miraculous effects of the golden bead. What worried him was that with Bai Changchun's cultivation, he would definitely notice the changes in his injuries. He did not know if this would raise Bai Changchun's suspicions. Seeing that Bai Changchun's eyes were still closed, Yu Qianqiu did not believe that with Bai Changchun's cultivation, he would not be able to tell that he had recovered. After thinking about it, he first grabbed a spirit pill and swallowed it. Then, he grabbed a high-grade spirit stone with each hand and absorbed the spiritual qi within. No matter what the outcome was, he had to recover the vital essence in his body first. As for the rest, he would take it one step at a time. After a long time, when his body was full of vital essence, Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes in high spirits. The first thing he did was look at Bai Changchun. The old man was still as indifferent as before. Yu Qianqiu's gaze fell on the large area beside him that was stained with his blood. The blood had already dried and turned black, but it still made his heart ache. He took out a small shovel that he used to plant spirit herbs from his storage bag and scraped up the blood on the ground bit by bit before collecting it into a bag. He could not waste it. This pool of blood might be useless to others, but it was very useful to him. Every member of Utopia's army had a silver number plate on their chest. It contained their blood essence. They had poured half a bowl of blood into it, dipped a brush in it, and added it into the plate. Only then did it become the number plate that the members wore. The reason he did this was naturally so that he could better understand everyone's movements. This was especially so when he dragged Utopia into a fight. He knew every member's position very well. Apart from him, no one else in Utopia knew about this. Not long after, the bag in his hand was filled to the brim. The blood had seeped into the soil, so he had scraped a few layers of the ground. As long as it was soil mixed with his own blood, it was useful to him. It could be used for a long time, and for a long time, he would no longer have to feel heartache and bleed himself. His strange actions finally made Bai Changchun open his eyes, and the person who was watching his every move from the room not far away, Crane Li's gaze was also filled with doubt. What shocked the master and disciple the most was that Yu Qianqiu was able to recover in one night after suffering such heavy injuries. Furthermore, he even had a breakthrough in his cultivation. It was simply unbelievable. Yu Qianqiu focused on scraping the blood off the ground, and the originally flat ground immediately caved in. He weighed the bag in his hand and found that it weighed tens of kilograms. Although most of it was made up of mud, it was imaginable how much blood he had lost to be able to soak so much mud. After sacrificing so much, it was time for him to seek justice. Yu Qianqiu quietly tied up the bag and threw it into his storage bag. He turned to face Bai Changchun and knelt down. I left Obedient Island without permission and was framed. I was tricked by Senior's disciple, He Li, otherwise, would not have dared to leave Obedient Island without permission. Senior, please seek justice. He had already made up his mind to kill He Li, so he did not leave any leeway. He was not afraid that He Li would dare retaliate against him in front of Bai Changchun. Ever since Yu Qianqiu had suddenly returned, He Li had sensed that something was wrong. In truth, Bai Changchun and Yu Qianqiu had returned right after each other. Upon seeing his master, He Li immediately said that Yu Qianqiu had fled Obedient Island while he was away. He dared to say this because he had returned to Twilight Valley and discovered that Yu Qianqiu had disappeared. As a result, he concluded that he had been burned to ash by the blue flames. Who could have expected that scoundrel to return right after he reported to his master? Now that he heard Yu Qianqiu say this, He Li was frightened out of his wits. He immediately knelt at Yu Qianqiu's side and kowtowed. Master, Yu Qianqiu is framing this disciple. It was clearly him who fled while this disciple was gone, but he wants to pin the blame on this disciple. What? Are you panicking now? Are you afraid? You must be very surprised that I didn't die. Yu Qianqiu teased, I remember everything you said to me in Twilight Valley, not forgetting a single word. Are you going to tell Senior by yourself, or do you want me to do it for you? The moment the words Twilight Valley came out, Bai Changchun stared at He Li. He Li indignantly said, Yu Qianqiu, don't slander me. When did I go with you to Twilight Valley? He Li wanted nothing more than to tear Yu Qianqiu to pieces on the spot, but he did not dare to do so. He couldn't understand how Yu Qianqiu had managed to escape from Twilight Valley. First, there was the array protecting the blue flames, and then there was the array outside Twilight Valley. Two ancient arrays. How could he have come out if he could not enter? He had also thought of a terrifying possibility. Bai Changchun and Yu Qianqiu had arrived one after the other, so perhaps Bai Changchun had brought Yu Qianqiu out. However, after Bai Changchun heavily injured Yu Qianqiu, he dispelled this doubt. Slander me? Haha. He Li, there is no grudge between us. If it weren't for the fact that you wanted to take my little life, I wouldn't have been able to find you today. Also, Yu Qianqiu suddenly changed the topic and harshly yelled, He Li, the personal grudge between you and me is small. After leaving Twilight Valley, I originally wanted to leave, but when I thought about how you vainly attempted to use the power of the demon realm to disturb the mortal world after Senior Bai went to the Eastern Holy Lands, I, Yu Qianqiu, as a member of the mortal world, will risk my life to expose your scheme to Senior Bai. As long as Senior Bai understands, for the sake of the peace of the mortal world, I, Yu Qianqiu, am willing to sacrifice my lowly life to expose your scheme to Senior Bai. His words were spoken with a strong sense of righteousness, and there was a trace of the lofty sentiments of sacrificing himself to protect the Tao. As for what he was thinking, only he himself knew. When he looked at Bai Changchun, he was confident that he would have some sort of reaction, but Bai Changchun remained expressionless the entire time. He simply sat there, listening to the two argue, showing no reaction. This made Yu Qianqiu's little heart a little nervous. Master, this person is speaking irresponsibly and deliberately driving a wedge between us master and disciple. He definitely doesn't have any good intentions. This disciple is willing to kill such a vile person. He Li hurriedly explained. He had actually wanted to silence Yu Qianqiu by killing him. He knew that he had been too careless at the time, believing that Yu Qianqiu could not escape Twilight Valley, so he had said many things that he should not have. If he had allowed Yu Qianqiu to continue, it would have been impossible for Bai Changchun not to believe him. He Li expectantly stared at Bai Changchun. As long as his master nodded, he would kill him. Yu Qianqiu sneered, "You want to silence me? He Li, you are a smart person. You should know that Senior Bai's divine eyes are like lightning. All deceit and deception are useless. Obediently admit your guilt. That will save me the trouble of exposing your past. Perhaps Senior Bai will spare your life for the sake of our relationship as master and disciple. You must know that there is a good saying in this world: those who confess will be lenient, those who resist will be severely punished. Can't you see that Senior Bai isn't saying anything because he wants to give you one last chance?" Bai Changchun gave Yu Qianqiu a strange glance. He Li, on the other hand, broke out in a cold sweat and yelled, "Yu Qianqiu, shut your mouth. Stop talking nonsense and trying to bewitch people." Chapter 292. Who's spouting nonsense? Yu Qianqiu glared at him. "You called Senior by an old fart behind his back. Do you admit it?" He Li paled in fright and could no longer kneel. He hurriedly stood up and yelled, "Yu Qianqiu, if you keep talking nonsense, don't blame me for being impolite." With the other's provocation, Yu Qianqiu's character from back when he roamed the streets once more appeared. There was nothing to be afraid of in a quarrel, let alone a duel. He stopped kneeling and immediately stood up. He rolled up his sleeves and pulled out his sword. He held the sword in his hand like a machete and waved it twice. He sneered and said, "Birdman, you want to fight because you have a guilty conscience, don't you? You don't dare to let me finish?" His image as a street scoundrel caused Bai Changchun's eyes to freeze for a moment. He Li glanced at his master and bit his lip until it was white. In the end, he did not dare to attack, but his entire body trembled in anger. He had lived in the demon region for many years. Although his cultivation was not at the peak, whether it was the Yao King or the Ghost King, no one dared to act so rudely with him. Today, he had finally met his match. Yu Qianqiu seemed to realize that his current appearance was a disgrace and had ruined the righteous image he had just put on. With an embarrassed expression, he sheathed his sword and cupped his hands to Bai Changchun. "Senior Bai," that day, He Li told Junior that Senior had gone out and would need 10 some days to return. He also told me that this world had 3 true flames and that Twilight Valley hid one of the 3 true flames, the Azure Flame. He spent all his effort to entice Junior's heart and finally tricked Junior into entering Twilight Valley. "Nonsense, it was clearly you who used the roasted fish to trick me into taking you there." He Li's voice was harsh, his 2 hands forming into claws. Gray evil energy curled around his fingertips and seethed with killing intent. At the slightest misstep, he would deliver a fatal blow. To the side, Yu Qianqiu naturally saw and sensed this, and he immediately became cautious on the inside. "Why would I lie to a birdman like you? If you didn't tell me about Twilight Valley's hidden blue and that 9 nethers hidden black, who the hell would know that there was some 3 true flames here? I've never even heard of them before." "What? Do you really want to kill someone in front of Senior Bai?" Yu Qianqiu put on a disdainful look. He turned around and continued to salute. Junior was trapped by He Li in the green fire great array. Only then did I know the cause of the matter from his mouth. He said that the senior wanted to pass the position of torture envoy of the demon ghost region to someone called Mr. Nongzhu, but that Mr. Nongzhu was not willing to take over. Instead, he suggested letting He Li take over. In the end, I happened to come to Obedient Island and lived here as an outsider for the first time. He Li was worried that Senior would pass the position of punishment envoy to me, so he wanted to kill me. The reason was that Senior and I were both humans, while he was a demon. After some insider information that outsiders did not know was revealed, He Li's face turned ashen. He knew that everything was over. His claws returned to normal, and the vicious aura retracted back into his body. He stood there as if he was waiting for death. He was well aware of his master's cultivation. If his master wanted his life, he wouldn't even have a chance to do so. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and proudly continued, Junior found it strange at the time. With his cultivation, he could have killed me anywhere, so why did he have to go through so much trouble to lure me to Twilight Valley's Green Fire Great Array? After asking, I learned that the demon ghost region has been intimidated by a set of spirit treasures, and no battle can escape Senior's discerning eyes. As long as he trapped me in the Green Fire Great Array and waited for the Green Fire Great Array to erupt, this Junior would die without anyone knowing. Not even Senior would know. At that time, he could just make up a reason for my escape and easily escape responsibility. In truth, to this Junior, a mere core formation cultivator dying in the demon ghost region is nothing. At this point, Yu Qianqiu suddenly revealed a pained expression. He thrust his sword at Healy and yelled, but that birdman was completely deranged. He said that Senior would show some mercy to any human that came to the demon ghost region, but he would be merciless to the Yao ghosts, killing them without mercy. He wanted to vent the anger of the demi-humans and actually wanted to use the power of the demon ghost region to rampage through the human world once he had complete control over the demon ghost region. For this, even if this Junior had to escape Twilight Valley, he would risk his life to come here and expose the truth to Senior. As he spoke, he deeply bowed to Bai Changchun. But when he bowed, Bai Changchun did not react for a long time, as if he had never heard him. Yu Qianqiu stood up and saw that Bai Changchun was unperturbed and expressionless. Moreover, he had closed his eyes once more. Crane Li also discovered it, and exchanged a glance with Yu Qianqiu, his enemy. The former's stunned expression revealed a look of joy, while the latter was cursing in his heart. Now that things have reached this point, this disciple admits it all and does not dare to hide anything, nor does he dare to beg for Master's forgiveness. I implore Master to punish me. This disciple will die without complaint. It is just that I have let down Master's many years of guidance. This disciple's heart aches, but it is too late for regrets. In the blink of an eye, Healy had already knelt on the ground with tears streaming down his face, admitting his guilt. Fuck. Was he playing the sympathy card? This birdman could really go act. Damn. He was just about to succeed, so he didn't want to ruin it. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched, and he immediately knelt down. In order to protect the peace of the human world, Senior has presided over this desolate land for more than 2,000 years. Such a magnificent feat is truly a model for the human cultivation world. If Junior has the chance to return to the human world, he will definitely spread the praises of Senior's deeds and Senior will be revered by all generations. His bootlicking was simply too flattering. He was flattering by Changchun, but he was killing Healy. He and Healy had already caused such a ruckus that neither of them would let the other go. The two kneeling there were well aware of this. Yu Qianqiu wanted to flatter by Changchun until he had no choice but to kill Healy. Sending two more flattering hats was just a bit of lip service, but leaving behind a future problem would be troublesome. Healy naturally understood, and a hint of resentment flashed through his eyes. He suddenly turned his head and said, Yu Qianqiu, I admit that I tricked you into the blue fire array, but there is one thing I don't understand. The array inside the blue fire array and the array outside Twilight Valley are both ancient arrays. Ordinary people who don't understand the technique cannot enter and leave. How did you escape from inside? Yu Qianqiu's heart chilled. This birdman truly wasn't a good person. He was clearly saying this for Bai Changchun to hear. If he didn't give a good explanation, even if Bai Changchun killed this birdman, it wouldn't end well for him. Fortunately, he had already considered this point and had a countermeasure. As for his invincible escape technique and his life-saving technique, he definitely wouldn't say anything. After a moment of silence, he shook his head and smiled. Healy, do you still remember the murals in Twilight Valley? Healy put on a sincere expression and asked, could the murals in Twilight Valley contain some sort of method to break arrays? That's not right. You were trapped in the blue fire array, so you couldn't have come out and carefully studied the murals. Could it be that you've memorized all the murals on both sides just by passing by? That's not it. Let me ask you, do you know the origins of the woman in the murals? Yu Qianqiu asked with a smile. The two of them continued to exchange questions and answers as if the bickering had never happened. I know. She's the divine craftsman's maid, Little Snow. It's Little Snow, correct. Let me ask you, do you know her origins? Healy suspiciously replied, I don't know. Could it be that her origins are related to your escape? As expected of a smart person. AI. If anyone else had been trapped by you, they would have undoubtedly died, and your scheme would have succeeded. Unfortunately, you ran into me. The will of the heavens wants me to live. Yu Qianqiu looked at Healy and gave a pleased smile. The extreme north has the snow fox race, and Little Snow comes from there. Just like you, I'm a demi-human. After the divine craftsman died, Little Snow returned to the snow fox race and passed down a few treasures and arrays that the divine craftsman had refined. Coincidentally, I had a rather good relationship with the snow fox race, and the blue fire array and the array outside Twilight Valley were also recorded in the snow fox race. Coincidentally, I also read about them. Haha. I spent some time pondering and managed to escape just like that. Healy, don't you think that the heavens have not forsaken me? Healy stood there in a daze, completely speechless. Even he had run into such a coincidence. Even Bai Changchun's brows twitched, as if this was his first time learning of Little Snow's origins. He opened his eyes, and his gaze swept over the two of them. His lips moved slightly as he spat out an ancient voice, Are the two of you done arguing? I won't ask who's right or wrong, nor will I say anything else. Only one of you can stay alive on Obedient Island. Do as you see fit. After saying this, he closed his eyes again. What did he mean? The two of them were dumbfounded. They had been quarreling like monkeys for a long time, but this was what Bai Changchun had been holding back for so long. Then what had they been arguing about? He clearly wanted the two of them to fuck. Yu Qianqiu came to his senses and let out a strange cry. The sword in his hand shot at Healy like a bolt of lightning. This was a fight to the death. He naturally had to strike first. Chapter 293. When Healy heard his master's words, he was overjoyed. His cultivation level was clearly higher than Yu Qianqiu's by a large margin. His master's actions were clearly biased towards him. But before he could finish being happy, Yu Qianqiu made the first move. He didn't even greet him and attacked. Yu Qianqiu's actions were considered a sneak attack. But the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. It would have been strange if a sneak attack had succeeded. Healy roared, despicable. At the same time, his fingers formed 5 claws and he waved his hand to deflect the flying sword. The two of them were very close. After the flying sword was deflected, Healy aimed for Yu Qianqiu's shoulder. Yu Qianqiu wasn't an idiot. He knew that the chance of this sword injuring his opponent was very small. When he released the flying sword, he slapped the ground with his other hand. The kneeling person stood up and bounced into the air. The flying sword that was deflected by Healy returned in a blink of an eye and caught Yu Qianqiu. You feathered animal, you dare to say the word despicable in front of me? Are you done being despicable and I'm not allowed to be despicable? Pfft. I said the wrong thing. How can I be the old man of a feathered animal? Yu Qianqiu stood in the air and cursed. At the same time, shio shio sounds could be heard. Nearly 100 flying swords flew out from his storage pouch and circled around his body. It was a spectacular sight to behold. Once the flying swords appeared, he could immediately feel that after his cultivation level reached the late stage of core formation, he could control them more freely. To Healy, he felt that this was a battle without any suspense. It was an opportunity given to him by his master. Looking up at Yu Qianqiu, he sneered, "You're the one who asked for it. Don't blame me." His hands formed into claws and slowly lifted up. The vicious energy around his claws reappeared and solidified into something that looked like scales. His hands looked like claws. Evil chi emanated from his claws and revolved around his arms, slowly covering his entire body, forming a faintly discernible membrane on the surface of his body. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes as he looked down. This was the third time he had fought against a master in the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage. The first time he caused trouble at supporting Immortal Island's new talent assembly, he was severely injured by Dongfang Chang AO and fled. The second time was not long ago, when he had a small test with Wu Zhengang. He didn't expect the third time to come so soon. This time was different from the previous 2 times. It would be a fierce battle. Although he didn't know what Bai Changchun's intentions were, he wouldn't give up easily until the last moment. He only had one chance to ride on Bai Changchun's coattails. If he didn't try his best, how would he know the result? Therefore, he wouldn't run away easily. He was destined to fight to the end. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never used his full strength in a battle. Today, he would get what he wanted. After noticing the change in He Li's hands, a thought suddenly flashed in Yu Qianshou's mind. He had never seen this birdman holding any weapons. His original body was a crane. Could it be that he was used to using his claws? The membrane on his body was naturally his protective aura. He didn't know if his flying swords would be able to break through his aura. Go! Yu Qianshou opened his eyes and pointed down with the sword-driving art. Among the swords that were dancing around him, 50 flying swords flashed in all directions, drifting erratically around He Li, appearing and disappearing at a speed that was hard to predict with the naked eye. Their speed was extremely fast, quietly approaching the target. Now that his cultivation had increased, he could control flying swords with such ease. It feels so good, this was what Yu Qianshou was thinking at this moment. He Li was as motionless as a mountain, his eyes darting left and right as he guarded against any sudden attacks from the flying swords. He had never seen someone like Yu Qianshou who could simultaneously control so many flying swords. However, he didn't panic in the slightest. No matter how mystical Yu Qianshou's sword control technique was, he was still a core formation cultivator and couldn't pose much of a threat to him. However, he wasn't one to underestimate his opponent. He waited here and didn't move because he wanted to see just how much strength Yu Qianshou had. After all, the fact that Yu Qianshou had been able to escape from Twilight Valley meant that he wasn't as simple as he made himself out to be. If that really was the case, he would quickly end this battle. At some point, Bai Changchun was standing under the eaves with his hands behind his back, calmly watching the battle unfold before him. He Li's calmness and vigilance allowed Yu Qianshou to guess what he was planning. His eyes narrowed, and a glint flashed in his eyes. He took out a stack of yellow talismans from his bag of holding, and with a wave of his left hand, a group of yellow shadows shot toward He Li. He Li glanced up in surprise. He hadn't expected that Yu Qianshou would be able to control so many flying swords at the same time and still have the time to do something else. He glanced at the flickering cold light around him, and his protective stellar energy surged, rapidly thickening. At this moment, the group of yellow shadows exploded, engulfing He Li in flames. He Li sneered. So it was just a bunch of fire talismans. Did these things really think they could injure him? As the flames spread to the surrounding houses, Bai Changchun's long beard fluttered without any wind, and the flames stopped right in front of the houses. As the flames burned, Yu Qianshou threw out a stack of talismans in his right hand. A group of yellow shadows rushed into the sea of flames, and immediately after, a series of loud explosions rang out. The entire obedient island could probably feel the tremors. These were the astral breaker talismans, made by Chen Feng. However, these talismans seemed to have some effect on early nascent soul stage cultivators, but not on tribulation stage cultivators. Yu Qianshou naturally knew this, and the effect he wanted was to confuse the eyes and ears. The astral breaker talismans rang out, and Yu Qianshou formed a hand seal. Within the sea of flames and smoke below, a cold light flashed continuously, followed by a series of rapid explosions that lasted for a long time. However, after a short while, the explosions gradually faded until there was no more movement. In the air, Yu Qianshou's expression changed. The 50 flying swords that he had released were all gathered together, and were no longer under his control. What was going on? Not long after, the flames burned out, and the smoke from the astral breaker talismans gradually dissipated. He Li's ferocious smile appeared, and in his hand was a large number of flying swords that were gathered together. These were the flying swords that Yu Qianqiu had released. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. The flying swords were so fast, but they were all caught by He Li. Is that all you've got? He Li sneered. As he spoke, he twisted his hands, and the 50 flying swords that had been tempered by the black gold sand made a zhi sound. In the blink of an eye, he twisted them into a ball and threw them to the ground. Damn it! What kind of rotten claw is that? It's simply abnormal. Yu Qianqiu's eyelids twitched. Even though he was at a disadvantage in a fight, he still had to take advantage of his words. Then I'll let you know the power of my crane claw. He Li snorted coldly. His figure suddenly disappeared. It was as if he had teleported. He felt that he had figured out Yu Qianqiu's background, so he immediately launched an attack. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. Could it be the teleportation at the end of the crossing calamity? No. He vaguely saw a shadow flickering in the air. It was definitely not teleportation, but because the speed was too fast. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a fatal threat. With a thought, the surrounding flying swords danced around his body, forming a cold light to protect his body. Dang! A crisp sound was heard. Several flying swords were slapped away. Due to the obstruction of the flying swords, He Li appeared not far away. He drilled through the sword net and stretched out his claws. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. With a thought, the surrounding flying swords turned around and shot towards He Li like a torrential rain. Unfortunately, they collided with He Li's protective aura qi and bounced off. They simply could not break through his protective aura qi. Well, a person who was not good at long-range attacks but good at close-range attacks would certainly have a stronger defense. Yu Qianqiu was chased in the air. He dodged left and right. The bounced flying swords were once again regrouped and continued to attack. Rapid explosions resounded in the air. Although He Li was not afraid of these flying swords, they still hindered his flying speed. He could not catch up to Yu Qianqiu in a short period of time. After a long time, he was naturally annoyed. His hands moved like a phantom. Every flying sword that flew towards him was caught by him. As long as they were caught, Yu Qianqiu would not be able to take them back based on his cultivation. Other than those who were at the end of the crossing tribulation, this was the first time Yu Qianqiu had seen someone who could attack so quickly. His flying swords were already fast enough. But his opponent was actually able to catch them with his bare hands. This was a little too fast. He did not know that He Li was a crane of the demon race. He was most proficient in speed. How could an ordinary person compare to him? Especially his pair of claws. Although he did not use any treasures, his claws were not inferior to treasures. Moreover, they could evolve along with his cultivation. He Li caught 4 or 5 flying swords and threw them away. After a few times, there were not many flying swords left in the air. But Yu Qianqiu had no choice. If he did not use his flying swords, he would be caught. Fuck. When the last few swords in the air were twisted into a dough twist, Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. He Li had already shot towards him like lightning. Yu Qianqiu did not dodge. He knew that he could not dodge with his speed. So he jumped down from the flying sword. It looked like he was jumping off a building to his death. The flying sword under his feet played its final role in blocking the enemy. It whistled as it shot towards He Li. Yu Qianqiu shouted as he fell, "Senior Bai, save me." His voice was extremely miserable. Creak. The last sword was sacrificed. He Li laughed evilly and pounced towards Yu Qianqiu. He stretched out his claws and pierced the top of Yu Qianqiu's head. Looking down, he suddenly saw Yu Qianqiu raising his head and looking at him coldly. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and pointed 2 fingers at his own claw. He was really courting death. Crane Li's smile became even more radiant. His 5 claws fiercely clasped onto the 2 fingers that Yu Qianqiu had pointed at him. If nothing unexpected happened, they would be able to see a badly mutilated scene and miserable screams. But an accident really happened. The moment the fingers and claws intersected, Yu Qianqiu's two fingers flashed with a demonic green light. He Li's claws immediately felt a burning pain. The gang qi covering his claws was instantly broken. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted. He had condensed the highest temperature of his blue flame to unleash this attack. He had spent half a day putting on a show just to wait for Li He's carelessness. In this battle, it was either you die or I live. There was no room for negotiation. He Li could not run away. Although the power of the blue flame was huge, but with his opponent's high cultivation, it would be difficult to get close to him. He Li could not catch up to him. No matter how powerful the blue flame was, it would be useless if it could not hit him. After witnessing He Li's speed, Yu Qianqiu was even more determined to lure the enemy. Only when the enemy was careless, would it be the best opportunity for his blue flame to show its power. And this attack really worked. The green flame shot out from his two fingers instantly broke through Heli's earth energy, and directly burned the claw that was reaching out towards him to ashes. Yu Qianqiu would not give him a second chance. Even if he worked hard to lure the enemy, he would not give He Li a chance to turn things around. Yeah! Yu Qianqiu roared. Before he could even retract his finger, a burst of vigorous green flame surged out of his body. The incomparably high temperature quickly engulfed He Li, who was on top of him. The green flame spun and emitted a hoo-hoot sound. Then, a green pillar of flame soared into the sky and wrapped around He Li with an imposing aura that shook everyone's mind. Ah! It's the blue fire. He Li let out a blood-curdling scream. When he came to his senses, he twisted his body, but before he could escape, he disappeared within the flames. In the end, he was unable to resist the burning of the blue flames that Yu Qianqiu had used to kill his enemies. Bai Changchun, who was under the eaves, witnessed this scene. His eyes flashed, but he did not say a word. Chapter 294. Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief as the green flames slowly receded back into his body. He was afraid that he would not be able to break through He Li's gang qi, so when he pointed his finger, he had condensed almost 1/10 of the fire elements in his body. This was also the limit of his current cultivation. If one day his cultivation was high enough, he would be able to condense all the fire elements in his body into one point. Presumably, the power would be even more astonishing. This was like comparing a piece of burning paper to a piece of burning firewood. After igniting, the paper and firewood may both release flames of the same size, but if you grab the burning paper, you might be able to extinguish it. Of course, your hand would be burned. But if you grabbed the burning firewood with your hand, even if you could extinguish it, you would be able to smell the aroma of roasted meat on your palm. From this, it could be seen that as long as you provided more fire elements, the more powerful it would be. This was the same principle as the flames released by Yu Qianqiu. Under the suppression of a flame of the same size, the more fire elements Yu Qianqiu provided, the higher the temperature. That small point contained 1/10 of the fire elements in his body. In addition to the overbearing nature of the green flame, how could He Li endure it? The compressed green flame, in addition to the released from his body, instantly forced out nearly 30% of the fire elements in his body. Although a lot of it was recovered in the end, there was still nearly 1/10 of the fire elements in his body. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly. If he had not met such a strong opponent, he would not have been so extravagant. If he had to do it a few more times, the fire elements in his body would only be enough for him to use it 10 times at most. Turning around silently, Yu Qianqiu looked at the legendary celestial being. He did not know what would happen next. After all, he had killed Bai Changchun's disciple, and he had comprehended the starflame fire art from the stars. If Bai Changchun comprehended the starflame fire art from the heavenly Tao, Bai Changchun would understand with a single glance. But if it was different, Bai Changchun would naturally question him, especially when he used the azure flame. A core formation cultivator can actually kill a tribulation passing stage cultivator. You do have some skill. No wonder you dared to break into my Shantian island. Bai Changchun stood under the eaves and nodded. He could not see how He Li's death affected him. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, Senior is overpraising me. I, Heli, was careless. I only succeeded by chance. Rumor has it that there is a god of fire in the immortal world, but I have only heard of fire-controlling magic tools in the mortal world. I did not expect that I would be able to broaden my horizons today. There is actually someone who can use his own body as a magic tool, storing fire in his body to be controlled. However, this method of control is a little clumsy, otherwise, Heli would have been defeated by your hands long ago. I don't know which expert taught you this technique. To be able to have such a divine ability, I presume your master is not a nobody in the cultivation world. Can you tell this old man? This old man wants to pay a visit. Bai Changchun said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly. I won't hide it from you, senior. I have 2 masters, but unfortunately, I didn't inherit their teachings. Currently, all the skills I use are self-created, and I practice them randomly to protect myself. Self-created? Bai Changchun's expression was slightly moved. Anyone who was able to create their own cultivation technique was an outstanding genius, and their achievements were higher than ordinary people. Even Bai Changchun himself was like this. His eyebrows twitched as he asked, Since you have a master, why didn't you inherit their teachings? Why don't you tell me? It seemed that this old fellow's Tao was different from his own. Yu Qianqiu speculated to himself. He immediately recounted how he had become on Kuangsung's disciple and how he had been abandoned on Fuxian Island. Of course, he only said things that were beneficial to him, and he deleted the unfavorable parts. In short, he described himself as extremely wronged. So that's how it was. Bai Changchun nodded, not expressing any doubt. He then asked, Did you use Twilight Valley's azure flame just now? Senior is wise. Heli trapped me in the azure fire array, but he did not know that this junior was like a fish in water. This junior precisely used the azure flame, Yu Qianqiu replied. He also understood that if he wanted to stay in the demon realm, the secret of this fire technique would be exposed sooner or later. It was better to tell the truth to avoid trouble later on. Heli trapped you in the azure flame, but in the end, he died to it. It could be said that the heavenly Tao's cycle of retribution is not pleasant. Bai Changchun calmly gazed at Yu Qianqiu and said, I said before that between you and Heli, only one can stay alive on Obedient Island. Since you have survived and have no master, then stay. Starting from today, I will leave the deficient flame profound fruit to you. Be careful not to make any mistakes, or else I will not forgive you. After saying this, he returned to his room and sat down cross-legged. He then added, Repair the damaged ground outside the room. He then closed his eyes. He said all this, not caring whether Yu Qianqiu agreed or not. It was over just like that. Yu Qianqiu froze and then looked at the craters on the ground. These were all caused by his astral-shattering talismans. He did not dare to ask any more questions. First, he collected the flying swords that were twisted by Heli. Although they were already useless, the materials were still there. They could still be used if he refined them again. It was not difficult to level the ground again. He just had to go outside and dig some soil to fill it. Then, he swept the ground and it would be done. Then, he went to the deficient flame profound fruit that was originally under Heli's care. Looking at the fiery red leaves swaying in the wind, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a bit of a toothache. This piece of land, in addition to his original land, was enough for him to work hard. But this was not a big deal. The key was that each of these plants needed high-grade spirit stones to grow every day. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and was a little unhappy. The old man didn't give him any benefits, nor did he hint that he would pass the position of torture envoy to him in the future. Did he want him to pay spirit stones in advance to help him grow vegetables? Over time, it would not be a small number. Sigh. The old man does not know how to behave. He did not even give me any verbal encouragement. You are ruthless. I admit defeat. Just as he was complaining in his heart, Bai Changchun's voice sounded in his ears. I have already sent a message to the entire demon ghost domain. From today onwards, you are my disciple. You can walk freely in the demon ghost domain, and no one will make things difficult for you. The spirit stones needed to grow the deficient flame profound fruit can be asked from any demon king or ghost king in the demon ghost domain. They will give it to you. Ah. NN. Yu Qianqiu nodded his head in a daze. His face was full of surprise and he could not hide it even if he wanted to. Happiness came too suddenly. The old man looked very boring, but he did not expect him to like to surprise people. Look, he accidentally became the old man's disciple. Wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted in the demon ghost domain in the future? Damn. There were many good things in the demon ghost domain. Not bad, very good. Disciple understands. Yu Qianqiu bowed towards the center of the island. He stood up and counted with his fingers. This was already his third master. However, this master was not an ordinary person. The first two masters could not be compared to him. The moment he opened his mouth, he gave Yu Qianqiu an inexhaustible amount of money. Get to work. Without saying a word, Yu Qianqiu took out a pile of spirit stones and busied himself. It did not matter if he paid the capital first. Anyway, someone would reimburse him. His enthusiasm was like the overflowing yellow river, endless. Chapter 295. By Changchun picking Yu Qianqiu to plant the lac flame profound fruit was definitely the wisest choice. The most important thing was that this guy had done this before, so he could directly take up the post without any training. Especially in terms of his work attitude, there was no lack of commendable points. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was immersed in hard work. There were about 200 lac flame profound fruits in the piece of land that he had opened before, but there were about 1,800 left by Healy, so there were about 2,000 in total. Calculating it, he would consume more than 2,000 high-grade spirit stones every day. After calculating, the busy Yu Qianqiu was thinking about when to go to the Ghost King's house to get to know them. 2,000 a day, in a year, it would be more than 700,000 high-grade spirit stones. In the cultivation world, it was enough to support several small sections. Everyone was working under by Changchun, so why did he have to pay for it alone? Thinking about how he still had a large number of subordinates to support, and how high the salary he gave to his subordinates, the expenses were huge. Since I am already by Changchun's disciple, then what I have is master's. Helping master to support a large number of people is my duty. For the time being, it is better not to tell master. I will help master take care of them secretly and find a suitable opportunity to tell master. After finding a reason to comfort myself, the work was done. Yu Qianqiu cast his gaze outside the Thousand Li Ping Lake. Those demon kings and ghost king who were mingling in master's territory should pay some taxes. What excuse should I use to collect them? Well, I will just say that I am collecting protection fees. Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood and let out a long sigh of relief. Awesome. From today onwards, I can do whatever I want in the demon ghost region. This is something that I did not even dare to think about when I first came here. Thinking back to when I first came here, Meng Yan showed off his power to me. Now I really want to return it to him. Unfortunately, that guy was killed by Bai Changchun. It seems that I can only find an opportunity to show off in front of his widowed wife. Speaking of Yu Ji, at this time, Yu Ji was sitting in the Ghost King's hall with inexplicable surprise. The news of Meng Yan's death really made her sad for a long time. The fate of the two of them for countless years had ended here. Meng Yan, who was dead, could not be with her in the next life, forever. The dead was dead, and the living still had a future to walk. After experiencing the prosperity of the human world and experiencing the tribulation, she became a ghost cultivator for thousands of years. Yu Ji was sad. She thought that without the protection of Meng Yan, she would fall under the crotch of other ghost cultivators, with her appearance. Who knew that Bai Changchun would give her the power of the Ghost King here, which was Ghost Yen, it was a surprise. Yen. Although her cultivation was not very high, as long as she was still in the demon ghost territory, no one dared to disobey Bai Changchun's decree. However, today, Bai Changchun's message surprised her again. Yu Ji was stunned for a long time. He deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors. He committed treason and heresy, and has been executed. Today, I have accepted a new disciple named Yu Qianqiu, and I hope to cooperate with him in the demon ghost territory. She thought she had heard it wrong. Yu Qianqiu? Was it that Yu Qianqiu? That Yu Qianqiu actually became Bai Changchun's disciple? After coming to herself, she immediately confirmed her guess. Who else could Yu Qianqiu be except the Yu Qianqiu who broke into the demon ghost territory and was detained by Bai Changchun? He became Bai Changchun's disciple. He became Bai Changchun's disciple. Yu Ji sat on the throne with an inexplicable expression. She still remembered the oath that Yu Qianqiu made to her in the past. He said that when he had the ability, he would take her and her out of the demon ghost territory. Now that Meng Yan was dead, but she was still alive, then Yu Qianqiu must fulfill the oath that he made in the past. Otherwise, cultivators would suffer the wrath of heaven. Yu Ji's bright eyes sparkled, and there was no doubt that there was a hint of joy in her eyes. She had made a forward-looking investment in the past, just for a possibility. She didn't expect that such a thing would happen. It seemed that there was a high chance that she could leave the demon ghost territory. Under the throne, 2 rows of ghost generals in armor stood in great numbers. The group of generals had suspicious looks on their faces. They all noticed the abnormality of Yu Ji. Sai Zhangfei stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Madam, did something happen?" Hearing this, Yu Ji restrained her emotions, and her expression became solemn. She looked down at the people below, but her heart was in turmoil. "I've had enough of this half-human, half-ghost life. I don't want to be the ghost king who has power over a region. Whoever wants to be can do it. I only want to be reluctant to part with the world of mortals. I should be among the talented scholars and beautiful women under the waning lights." After a moment of silence, Yu Ji said calmly, "Mr. Yu is now the disciple of the Celestial Master. Pass down my order. If you see Mr. Yu, come and report immediately. I will go and greet him personally." Her tone was very calm, and there was nothing wrong with her words. She had learned a lesson from the death of Meng Yan and Aoli. It was better not to let others know that she wanted to leave the demon ghost territory. Otherwise, there would be consequences. Everyone understood that no one in the demon ghost territory was worthy of the title of Celestial Master other than Bai Changchun. However, the disciple of the Celestial Master made people speculate. In the demon ghost territory, Sai Zhangfei was relatively familiar with Yu Qianqiu. He asked doubtfully, "The Mr. Yu that Madam mentioned is Mr. Yu Qianqiu?" Hearing this, everyone came to a sudden realization, but they also couldn't believe it. Under everyone's doubtful eyes, Yu Ji said with a smile, "Yes, it is Mr. Yu Qianqiu. I just received the message from the Celestial Master." At this time, the Ghost King's hall exploded, and there was a lot of discussion. Sai Zhangfei happily cupped his fists and said, "Yes, I will immediately pass on the order." After saying that, he put his hand on the sword at his waist and dragged his armor out of the Ghost King's hall. Not to mention the people who knew Yu Qianqiu like Yu Ji, the other demon kings and Ghost King in the demon ghost territory became busy after receiving Bai Changchun's message. They sent their subordinates to find out who this Yu Qianqiu was. Some of them even ordered their subordinates to prepare a big gift. Most people knew Li He, but now that he was dead, not many people knew Yu Qianqiu. Since they didn't know him, they had to prepare a gift in advance. In short, after the news spread, the demon ghost territory became completely lively. During the day, demons ran amok, and at night, there were many ghosts. Everything was for the unknown Yu Qianqiu. The demon ghost domain was a bit chaotic. If Wu Sihai from the 4 great clans knew about this, he would definitely not find it strange. He had long since come to a conclusion that no matter where Yu Qianqiu went, there would be some trouble. It would be strange if nothing happened, and Wu Sihai had already experienced it many times. In fact, it had to be said that the people who were preparing to send the gifts were all very wise people. They did not know that Yu Qianzhou was already thinking about how to collect protection fees from them. Yu Qianzhou would definitely be very happy to see the gifts. At this time, Yu Qianzhou was on the lake of Shuntian Island. His palm was burning with a green flame. He was refining the 100 flying swords destroyed by Li He. The clear water in the lake was just right for the swords. He had to refine them again. With his current cultivation, he still couldn't fly. Without flying swords, he couldn't leave Shuntian Island. He couldn't possibly row a boat or swim. Although Chen Feng had many flying swords in Utopia, they were definitely not as good as these ones that were mixed with mystic gold sand. Furthermore, if he were to collect protection fees and encountered someone who was blind, he could not possibly use Bai Changchun for such a small matter. The better the flying swords, the more useful they were. He wasn't afraid of Bai Changchun finding out. Anyway, Bai Changchun already knew the secret of the green flame, so there was no need to hide it. However, Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the room at the center of the island, suddenly opened his eyes when the balls of molten metal were being refined into flying swords skillfully and casually in the green flame on his palm. Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the room at the center of the island, suddenly opened his eyes. His soul consciousness quickly moved to the surroundings of Yu Qianzhou, who was immersed in refining the swords, but the latter was completely unaware of it. After the 100 flying swords were refined, one was returned to the scabbard on his back, and the rest were returned to the storage bag. He originally wanted to go to the Demon King and the Ghost King to collect the fees, but after thinking about it, he felt that he should greet Bai Changchun first. He obediently arrived outside the house where Bai Changchun was sitting, bowed and said, "Master, disciple doesn't have enough spirit stones to plant the black flame profound fruit tomorrow. Can disciple go?" Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Bai Changchun. "I've already told you before, you can ask for spirit stones from any demon king or ghost king in the demon ghost domain. In the future, you don't have to look for me for such matters. You can handle it yourself. In short, you can't lose the black flame profound fruit." Disciple understands, disciple will do it now. Yu Qianzhou respectfully retreated. After walking a little further, with a kchang sound, his sword was unsheathed, turning into a stream of light that carried him far away. Only after flying far away did the respect on Yu Qianzhou's face turn into a wretched smile. He looked at the demon ghost domain in the distance, which was densely packed with worry. He stepped on the sword, waved his sleeves, put his hands behind his back, and increased his flying speed. He was a little impatient. Chapter 296. Flying out of the 1,000-mile lake, he immediately felt like he was in another world. The sunlight from before was already far behind him, and the dark and strange atmosphere caused the temperature to drop a few degrees. Yu Qianzhou stood on his sword and stopped in the air, looking around with a strange expression. He was anxious, and didn't know where he had gone. Between the mountains, there was an abundance of vegetation, ancient trees, and wisteria. All kinds of ancient and strange plants were densely packed together. Based on his previous life's logic, it was hard to understand why there was such an abundance of vegetation in this place that never saw the sun. All kinds of strange cries came from all directions, and the strange atmosphere reminded him of the first time he came to the demon ghost region with the various sects for training. At that time, some people wanted to fly in the demon ghost region with their swords, but before they could fly far, they were swallowed by the red light that suddenly appeared. Just thinking about it made him feel uneasy. Although he was here under the name of Bai Changchun, no one here knew him. What if some demon or ghost made a mistake and killed him? Safety first. Yu Qianzhou lowered his flying altitude, and slowly flew about 2 to 3 meters above the ground. He carefully flew through the dark forest. The vegetation that passed by him was clearly lush, but it gave people a feeling of lifelessness, which made him even more careful. After flying for a short while, Yu Qianzhou suddenly stopped. His nostrils flared, and he smelled a rich fragrance. It should be the fragrance of a flower. Could it be that his luck was so good that he encountered some rare spirit grass the moment he arrived? Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. His body flashed, and he passed through a gap between the vines. He flew his sword towards the source of the fragrance, and went deeper into the forest. The fragrance became stronger, and the strange noises gradually lessened. Before he saw the spirit grass that he had imagined, he first heard a series of pi pi pa 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 sounds of fighting. That's right, it should be the sound of fighting. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment. He placed his feet on the sword and squatted down gently. He nestled on the sword and slowly flew towards the place where the fight was taking place. The way he flew on the sword was indeed not very pleasing to look at. It felt like he was a thief. After flying for a short distance, a beautiful bright yellow suddenly appeared in front of him. Huge yellow flowers rose from the ground. Just the flowers alone were like huge millstones, and they were as tall as a person. That alluring fragrance was coming from the flowers. Yu Qianqiu was quite shocked. He had never thought that there would be such a large flower in this world. It was simply inconceivable. As expected of the devil domain, there were all sorts of strange things. Peach Blossom, I think you should just follow me. Hee hee. A burst of strange laughter came, followed by a clear woman's laughter and scolding. You dare to have ideas on this fairy. Old monster Teng, aren't you afraid that Grandma Teng will pull out your root of life? Fairy? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Could it be that there were beauties here? He was no longer in the mood to appreciate the huge yellow flowers. Instead, he used the big yellow flowers as a cover and moved towards the place where the fight was taking place. After getting close, he hid behind a yellow flower and secretly peeked at the fight not far away with shifty eyes. In a spacious area, green whip shadows and pink flower shadows danced in the air. An old man stood motionless. He was covered with rattan branches, but this was not the strangest thing. Several rattan whips stretched out from his back, making whooshing sounds. His opponent was a pink-clothed woman. Her graceful figure danced in the shadows of the whip, and her slender fingers constantly scattered peach blossoms in front of her to protect her body. Occasionally, she could also shoot branches at her opponent. Damn it! So it was a fight between two fairies. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows disapprovingly, but he still watched patiently. This was the first time he saw fairies fighting. He watched with great interest, but he did not notice that a big yellow flower behind him had quietly turned around. The petals, which were already big, were slowly opening up, facing Yu Qianqiu as if it was opening its bloody mouth. Yu Qianqiu was still hiding behind another yellow flower, peeking with his butt up, completely unaware of the movement behind him. Hard work paid off. After the pink-clothed woman flipped around a few times, Yu Qianqiu finally saw the woman's pretty face. She was wearing a palace dress and her gauze dress fluttered in the wind. She was indeed a beautiful fairy. However, this female fairy did not seem to be a match for the old monster. Every time she released a protective petal, it would be smashed by the old monster's rattan whip. The branches that she shot out were also easily broken by the old monster's extra rattan whip. The two of them were not on the same level at all. The old monster was clearly teasing the demoness with ease, but the demoness was frightened and panting. She was so tired that she was sweating profusely and panting. Peach Blossom, I advise you not to resist pointless. What's wrong with obeying me? The old monster cackled. The rattan vines that stretched out from behind him made him look like a spider in a spider's web. Although the demoness was at her wit's end, she still managed to catch her breath and said with a smile, If you want me to obey you, that's fine, but I'm not going to be a servant. Old monster Teng, I'll be yours the moment you kill Tingpa. I'm afraid you won't dare. Who doesn't know that you're famous for being afraid of your wife? As soon as these words came out, the old monster could not laugh anymore. Instead, he felt embarrassed and angry. He shouted, B*TCH, it's your fortune that I like you. Today, you have to obey me even if you don't want to. As he said that, the rattan whip became fiercer and fiercer. The female fairy was already in a precarious situation. A certain person hiding behind the yellow flower finally understood the reason and could not help but snicker. It turned out that even a fairy would find a mistress behind her wife's back. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin with one hand and considered whether he should go out and save the damsel in distress. As he was pondering, he suddenly cried out, F***ck. A yellow shadow flashed and his vision turned black. He was already trapped inside something. Yu Qianqiu immediately threw a few punches, but with his cultivation, he was unable to break the thing that trapped him. Then, in the darkness, a few more things that were as tough as ropes wrapped around him and tightened around him. There was even one that wrapped around his neck and a stinky liquid sprayed on his body. His strange cry immediately disturbed the two fighting fairies. The two demons temporarily stopped and retreated. They looked at the yellow flower that was wrapped up not far away and saw that it was violently shaking. The female fairy, who was panting, frowned. Just as she took a step forward, she stopped and looked back at the old monster. From the looks of it, it was obvious that he wanted to go over and rescue her, but he was afraid of being ambushed. The old monster snorted coldly and said, "Where did this reckless junior come from? You actually dare to pry into this old man's privacy." As he spoke, a vine whip behind him pierced straight towards the yellow flower. Right at this moment, the yellow flower suddenly exploded with a bang. Rays of sharp, cold light shot out from inside and shot into the sky. The yellow flower was instantly torn into pieces. Pa, pa, pa. F***ck. This is a man-eating flower. Yu Qianqiu jumped out from inside and repeatedly spat out the thing that entered his mouth. He didn't know what it was, but it didn't taste good. Even the gall bladder was almost spat out. He wiped the stinky and slippery liquid off his face. Before he could finish speaking, he saw the vine whip attacking him and stabbing towards his chest. Yu Qianqiu's first reaction was to grab the vine whip that was stabbing towards his chest. The two ends of the whip, one human and one demon, immediately began to fight. How refreshing, it's actually a human late-stage core formation cultivator. Strange, strange. Little child, you actually managed to break into this place. With the old monster's cultivation, he naturally couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. However, as soon as the two sides fought, he immediately felt it. The old monster clicked his tongue and laughed. Legend has it that human flesh is incomparably delicious. This old man has never eaten it before. This time, I'm in luck. Hearing the old monster say this, the female fairy also looked at Yu Qianqiu with a face full of surprise. How could someone break into this place? This was the center of the demon domain. Shameless boasting. A mere mid-stage nascent soul old monster dares to speak such arrogant words. You actually want to eat me? This old man thinks that you're tired of living. Yu Qianqiu sneered. With the vine whip in his hand, the other party saw through his cultivation. Naturally, he also saw through the other party's cultivation. He wasn't even afraid of mid-stage tribulation passing cultivators, so why would he be afraid of a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator? What an insolent child, hee. The old monster looked up to the sky and laughed. The vine whip in Yu Qianqiu's hands suddenly retracted. Yu Qianqiu immediately used all his strength to pull it back. Unfortunately, his cultivation wasn't as high as the old monster's, so he was dragged by the vine whip and slid down the ground, creating a trench. Chapter 297. The old demon was obviously afraid that Yu Qianqiu would let go. The vine whip in his hand suddenly grew longer and wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's wrist. Once it was pulled up, it moved faster and faster. Yu Qianqiu looked at the vine whip wrapped around his wrist and narrowed his eyes. His expression was calm. The old demon laughed wildly. The vine whip behind him covered the sky and wrapped around Yu Qianqiu. Cut! Yu Qianqiu's hands moved with the sword incantation and he let out a fierce shout. The cold lights that had broken through the yellow man-eating flowers and flew towards the horizon immediately flashed back and mercilessly whistled towards the countless vines that stretched out. With a burst of crackling sounds, a pile of vines immediately fell to the ground. Ah! The vine whips were originally connected to the old demon's body. This slash immediately caused the old demon to scream miserably. The vine whips that were mostly broken retracted. The old demon said in horror, "It's a flying sword." Impossible. How can there be so many flying swords? Not only him, but the female demon was also shocked. She had never seen or heard of someone who could control so many flying swords at the same time. They were the rising stars of the demon ghost domain. They lived in the center of the demon ghost domain and had never seen anyone, let alone someone who could control so many flying swords. It should be known that demon ghosts rarely used flying swords. They used all kinds of weapons. Only humans would use flying swords. Not to mention, ordinary people couldn't come to the center of the demon ghost domain. Naturally, the two demons had never seen it before. The flying swords cut through the countless vines and immediately returned to Yu Qianzhou's side. More than 100 flying swords danced around him, and a cold light lingered in this lush greenery. It was a spectacular scene with extraordinary momentum. Yu Qianzhou expressionlessly pulled off the vine that bound his wrist and cut off the connection with the old demon. He coldly snorted and said, "A mere old demon dares to make trouble in front of me. I say, you are tired of living." The old demon, who had suffered a loss, angrily shouted, "Hey! Ignorant junior, how dare you be so arrogant in my demon ghost region? I'll show you how powerful this old man is." With a wave of his hands, the ground shook and countless vines burst out of the ground, crazily sweeping towards Yu Qianzhou. The beautiful face of the female fairy who was watching the battle from the side immediately paled, and she was accidentally wrapped up by the vines that came sweeping over. Yu Qianzhou glanced at her indifferently and did not make any move to save her. He stared at the old monster and sneered, "In your demon domain? You actually dare to say such words in front of me? You've got guts." Even when he was with Bai Changchun, he had never said such words. Now that he heard an old monster say it, he naturally found it funny. Using the finger-driving sword art, a flying sword lifted him a few meters off the ground. The vines that were trying to wrap around him were immediately cut down by the other flying swords. The old monster's formation was indeed frightening. There seemed to be an endless number of vines spreading out from the ground, densely surrounding the open space. They constantly whistled, whipped, and stabbed at Yu Qianzhou from all directions. However, Yu Qianzhou did not panic at all. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and stood a few meters above the ground on his flying sword. He sneered, "Old monster, I want to see if your vines are endless. Today, this old man will cut you down until your vitality is greatly damaged." Among the dancing vines, a cold light flashed like lightning. They were extremely fast. If one came, they would be cut down. If two came, they would be cut down. No matter how many came, the nearly 100 flying swords could deal with them easily. They did not give the vines a chance to get close. Originally, according to Yu Qianzhou's temper, he wanted to burn all the vines with a green fire. However, ever since he modified the Guiyuan sword art, it was the first time he had used it so happily. Finally, his efforts were put to use. Therefore, he suppressed the thought of using the green fire. However, the old monster was in a bit of a predicament. It was not that his cultivation was inferior to Yu Qianzhou's, but the sword art that Yu Qianzhou cultivated was simply his nemesis. No matter how many vines he moved like the wind, Yu Qianzhou's sword moved like lightning and broke through his array of vines with ease. Looking at Yu Qianzhou, who was standing with his arms crossed and had a mocking expression, the old monster felt that he could not take it anymore. If this continued, it would really be as Yu Qianzhou said. He would definitely be cut down until his vitality was greatly damaged. There was no other way. This kid's sword art was his nemesis. The only thing he could do now was to leave first. A trace of resentment flashed across the old monster's face. He said, "Little kid, don't be too proud. This demon domain is not a place for you to be arrogant. This old man has something to do, so I will leave first. I will find you another day to settle the score." With that said, the dense vines in the surroundings all burrowed back into the ground. In a few blinks of an eye, they were all gone. The old demon turned around and scurried into the forest not far behind him. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He sneered and said, "Old shameless thing. You are really shameless. You can't win, so you run. You even dare to say nice words. I will let you run." With a point of the driving sword art, the flying swords immediately swarmed towards the escaping old monster. The old monster turned his head and was shocked. His 10 fingers immediately turned into 10 thick vine whips to block the flying swords. They quickly tangled with the flying swords. The vine whips formed by his 10 fingers were really powerful. The flying swords actually had a hard time cutting them. However, the old monster was still crying out in pain. Yu Qianqiu flew away on his flying sword. He was too lazy to fight with the old monster. Under his control, the flying swords shot through the gaps between the 10 thick vine whips, focusing on the old monster's body. The vine whips were thick and could be resisted. However, they were also clumsy. They simply could not stop so many flying swords from entering. A few holes immediately appeared on the old monster's body. Thick green liquid flowed out. The old monster screamed again and again. Suddenly, he let out a loud roar and let the flying swords pierce his body. The 10 vine whips and his arms broke off and shot out, knocking away many flying swords. The old monster's aura was very shocking. He fiercely attacked Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. The old monster was going all out. A group of flying swords immediately flashed back to block. The flying sword under his feet flashed and carried him up into the sky to avoid the vine whips. After flashing into the sky, Yu Qianqiu immediately realized something was wrong. He saw that after the old monster forced him away, it had shrunk into a pile. Its head and limbs were all gone. They had all shrunk into its body. Its body had turned into a pile of vines on the ground. Yu Qianqiu swooped down and pointed with his finger. The group of flying swords surged forward and picked up the pile of vines. The old monster had already disappeared. A hole had appeared below. He quickly released his divine sense to investigate and immediately felt a ball of vitality escaping from the hole. Yu Qianqiu quickly glanced at the 10 thick vines on the ground. This old monster was obviously learning from a lizard and cutting off its tail to survive. He, on the other hand, was cutting off his fingers to survive. The old monster could escape underground. Want to run? Not so easy. Yu Qianqiu shouted and pointed with his sword. Dozens of flying swords flew into the hole at lightning speed. Following the guidance of his divine sense, they chased after the old monster. A moment later, a mournful scream came from the hole. Clearly, the old monster had been severely injured again. However, because Yu Qianqiu's cultivation wasn't high enough, the range of his divine sense was limited. In addition, it went too deep into the ground, which more or less affected the release of his divine sense. The flying swords were no longer able to continue chasing after the old monster. "Brat, you will regret this." The old monster's voice was faintly coming from the hole. "Regret?" Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. He raised his hand and called back dozens of flying swords from the hole. Close to 100 cold gleams twined around his body. His expression was indeed a little ugly. "I didn't provoke you, but you provoked me first. How can I let you go?" Yu Qianqiu coldly glanced at the female monster that was still tightly bound by the vines. He pointed with 2 fingers and a few cold gleams shot out, removing the vines on the female monster. After the female monster was freed, she looked around. Suddenly, she was surrounded by dozens of flying swords. Yu Qianqiu floated in the air and said in a deep voice, "Where is the main body of that old monster? Don't tell me you don't know. If you don't want to die, tell me quickly." No matter how far the plants and other spiritual monsters ran, they couldn't run away like animals and other spiritual monsters. They couldn't run away from the ground. This was something Yu Qianqiu knew, so he asked. The beautiful seductress in pink clothes glanced at the rattan that had fallen all around. Her gaze finally fell on the 10 thick rattan that had fallen off. Her bright eyes lit up and she immediately bowed to Yu Qianqiu. Mister, that rattan monster was severely injured by Mr. It must have returned to its nest under the cliff of the western mountain. This little demon is willing to lead the way for Mr. N. Yu Qianqiu nodded and put away the flying swords that surrounded her. Suddenly, he said, "Wait a moment." He rode his sword and flew to the front of the hundreds of large yellow man-eating flowers. The flying sword that was circling around his body flashed out, and wherever the cold light passed, the man-eating flowers were shot into pieces. What was strange was that when these man-eating flowers were destroyed, they actually let out ear-piercing, jiu-jiu sounds. Yu Qianqiu frowned when he heard this. He waved his hand, and the flying sword flew out again. He only stopped after cutting down all the man-eating flowers from their roots. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of rare man-eating flowers had been completely cut down. He flew back on his sword and said coldly to the female monster, "Lead the way." Chapter 298. The two of them headed west. Yu Qianqiu rode on his sword and followed behind the female demon. That female demon's graceful figure did not touch the ground, only stepping on the grass. She looked light as a feather, but her speed was extremely fast, making Yu Qianqiu feel extremely amazed. She was literally flying on the grass. She seemed even more graceful than flying on grass. Her slender figure, pink clothes, and even her shoes were petite pink. The grass swayed with her feet and carried her far away. Her hair flew in the air and her pink clothes matched the grass. She was very beautiful. Grass elves really had a unique advantage. Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked, "What kind of monster is that old demon?" The female demon replied timidly, "He is an ancient vine spirit that has cultivated for 1,000 years. People around here call him Old Monster Tang." She wasn't a match for the vine monster, and now, the man in front of her could even beat the vine monster into fleeing. He even wanted to chase it to its lair. With this ability, it was naturally not a problem for him to deal with her, so it wasn't strange for her to be afraid. Oh. No wonder he uses vines as weapons. The female demon's words confirmed his guess. He looked at the slender figure and said with interest, "I heard Old Monster Ting call you Peach Blossom. Could you be a peach blossom tree spirit?" The female demon softly said, "Mister's guess is correct. I am a peach blossom tree spirit that has cultivated for 1,000 years. Peach Blossom, you and that old demon have both cultivated for 1,000 years. Why aren't you a match for him?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Although he and I have both cultivated for 1,000 years, he transformed into a human 200 years ago. I just reached the nascent soul stage not long ago and am not good at fighting. Naturally, I am not a match for him. The Peach Blossom demon replied. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He had heard about this from Bai Suzhen. In the demon race, it was even more difficult for grass and wood spirits to cultivate. Unlike animals, it was extremely difficult for grass and wood spirits to cultivate. Without intelligence, how could grass and wood spirits cultivate? Therefore, it was even more difficult for them to become spirits. In order to reach the stage where they could transform into humans, all demons had to reach the nascent soul stage. Most of the plants would eventually wither and die without being able to gather their spiritual wisdom to cultivate. Even if they could cultivate, it would be difficult for them to transform into a human form even after thousands of years of cultivation. Among human cultivators, even those at the end of the tribulation transcendence stage would die of old age. As the saying goes, where there are gains, there are losses. Although the heavens were unfair, they were actually quite fair. Compared to humans, demons, and ghosts, plant spirits were the most difficult to cultivate. However, as long as they could break through to the deity transformation final stage, it was said that the heavenly tribulations were the weakest, and they would almost always be able to ascend to the immortal realm. Since you can't beat him, why didn't you agree to Monster Ting's request? Yu Qianqiu smiled. If I didn't refuse, I would have died a long time ago, the Peach Blossom said in a low voice. Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, why is that? His thoughts went astray. Could it be that Monster Ting knew some method to absorb Yin to replenish Yang? Could it be that he would suck his mating partner dry? How did the two plant demons mate? The peach blossom bit her lip and said, Sir, you should be careful. Monster Tang has a wife called Tingpa. Her cultivation is higher than Monster Tang's. She has reached the nascent soul stage and is the subordinate of the Monster King, Miss Mu. Although she didn't answer him directly, Yu Qianqiu understood. He reckoned that Tingpa was a jealous woman and couldn't tolerate her husband having other women. He thought for a while and asked, what kind of demon is the Demon King Madame Mu? Is she the Monster King in charge of this place? Miss Mu is a magnolia demon. Her cultivation has reached the tribulation stage. She is the Monster King in charge of this place. Oh, Yu Qianqiu said. He thought, why are there only plant spirits here? Looking around, he understood. The plants here were much more exuberant than other places in the demon ghost territory. It was a good place for plant spirits. Speaking of Miss Mu, he thought of the 3 saints of Lingwu who had been killed. One of them, Red Lady, was definitely a coquettish and beautiful demon. He just didn't know what Miss Mu looked like. As he thought about it, an idea flashed in his mind. Don't I have a demon revealing mirror? I didn't use it before because Bai Suzhen is also a demon. Isn't it suitable in the demon ghost territory? Let's try it. Yu Qianqiu immediately took out the delicate demon revealing mirror. From the chain on it, it could be seen that this treasure should be hung around the neck. After wearing it around his neck, he looked at the peach blossom in front of him with the mirror. He didn't find anything. After he injected his divine sense into it, he finally found a magical effect. It turned out that he used his divine sense to look through the demon revealing mirror. The peach blossom seen by his divine sense in the mirror was no longer a graceful woman. A peach tree full of flowers appeared clearly in the demon revealing mirror. A divine craftsman was indeed a divine craftsman. The things he made were really magical. Yu Qianqiu sighed. After withdrawing his divine sense from the mirror, he felt that the small bronze mirror hanging on his neck was a little ugly. It was no different from the longevity lock hanging on the neck of a secular child. So he stuffed the mirror into the lapel on his chest and injected his divine sense into the peach blossom again. Fortunately, it could still show the original shape of the peach blossom. Good stuff. He touched his chest and found that the demon revealing mirror was hanging there. Along the way, they constantly encountered some of the largest groups in the demon ghost realm. They were the blood wolves that Yu Qianqiu had seen when he first came here. This kind of fierce animal was not afraid of death. Yu Qianqiu had dealt with them before. He knew that if they attracted companions, although he was not afraid, it would be a troublesome thing. So without saying anything, he killed every wolf he saw. He didn't even give them a chance to make a sound. This action made the peach blossom a little frightened. After coming out of the dense forest, the front suddenly opened up. A few hundred meters away, a tall stone mountain seemed to have been split into 2 halves. One half was intact, and the other half seemed to have been moved away. Green vines spread everywhere at the foot of the mountain, covering the entire foot of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the mountain wall in front of him and asked, "This is the West Mountain cliff you mentioned? Is this the hiding place of the old demon?" "Yes." The peach blossom looked around timidly and said, "Sir, please be careful. If the vine woman is here, it will be troublesome." TSK. This stone mountain seems to have been split by someone. The power of nature is really amazing. It is not something that can be done by human beings. Yu Qianqiu looked at the smooth stone wall and sighed. He looked like he was looking at the scenery. As for the vine woman, he was not afraid of her. Since she was the subordinate of the demon king who was in charge of this place, she would not dare to do anything to the disciple of Bai Changchun. "Sir, the formation of this stone wall is not the power of nature. It is indeed the work of human beings. It was split by a sword," the peach blossom reminded him softly. Yu Qianqiu immediately opened his mouth and was stunned. This stone wall was probably 700 or 800 meters high and 300 or 400 meters wide. Moreover, it was a mountain of pure stone. Could someone split the whole mountain with a sword? Isn't this too inconceivable? He asked in disbelief. It was split by a sword? That's impossible. Did you see it with your own eyes? I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but this is something that everyone in this area knows. The peach blossom looked around guiltily, bit her lip, and slowly said while looking at the stone wall, "It is said that more than 1,000 years ago, the Blood Wolf clan was the most powerful existence in the Demon Ghost region. At that time, the Blood Wolf Emperor had broken through to the soul formation stage, and he had the largest group in the entire Demon Ghost region. Thus, he was disloyal and did not want to be restrained by the Torture Master. As a result, he fought with the Torture Master here and was killed by the Torture Master. This stone wall was split by the Torture Master's sword during that battle. The other half of the mountain was shattered, and the Blood Wolf Emperor was buried under the rubble. If you remove the green vines all over the field, you will find that it is full of rubble." Yu Qianqiu looked at the half of the stone wall, a little confused. More than 1,000 years ago? At that time, Bai Changchun should have already taken over as the Torture Master of the Demon Ghost region. He swallowed and asked, "That battle, the Torture Master you are talking about is Immortal Master Bai who is now on Shantian Island?" "Yes, Immortal Master Bai. After that battle, I heard that Immortal Master Bai was angered, and then..." The peach blossom seemed to realize that she had said too much. She looked around guiltily and did not dare to continue. However, Yu Qianqiu was eager to know what Bai Changchun did after that, so he urged, "What happened after that? Tell me quickly." He urged, but the peach blossom did not dare to speak. In the end, after being threatened by Yu Qianqiu, she could not help but say, "After that battle, the Torture Master was furious. All the Blood Wolf clan members with a bit of cultivation, more than 400,000 of them, were all killed by the Torture Master in one night. At that time, there was a demon and a ghost in the Demon Ghost region who had also reached the soul formation stage, but because of that incident, they were also implicated. The Torture Master said that they were the ones who started it and wanted the two soul formation stage cultivators to kill themselves to atone for their crimes. Of course, the demon and the ghost refused, so the Torture Master fought the two of them alone and killed them. From then on, except for the Torture Master, there were no other soul formation stage cultivators in the entire Demon Ghost region. Mister, this is all I know. I really don't know anything else." Yu Qianqiu stared blankly at the stone wall and nodded his head. So this mountain was Bai Changchun's masterpiece, and it was actually split apart by a single sword strike. His cultivation was just too terrifying. Killing more than 400,000 blood wolves in one night. Ruthless. Ruthless beyond belief. Also, one person killed two soul formation stage cultivators at the same time. Those were two soul formation stage cultivators. The scene of that battle was so thrilling that it was hard to describe. One soul formation stage cultivator killed two soul formation stage cultivators at the same time. Wow! He was really powerful and ruthless. No wonder all the demons and ghosts in the Demon Ghost region trembled in fear at the mention of Bai Changchun's name and didn't even dare to speak loudly. Who would dare to speak loudly in front of such a killing god? No wonder Healy said that he was merciless towards demons and ghosts and killed without mercy. He really wasn't joking. This Immortal Master Bai is really amazing, hee. Yu Qianqiu squeezed out a smile. After knowing about Bai Changchun's glorious deeds, he was really scared. He only hoped that he didn't see through his little tricks. If he angered this killing god, with his cultivation level, he might not even be able to escape. Chapter 299. However, after thinking about it, he understood Bai Changchun's difficulties. Think about it, in this vast demon realm, demons and ghosts ran amok. If there was no one to restrain them, what would happen? If all these things broke into the human world, then the so-called cultivation world would not be able to stop such a huge force. At that point, the human world would be in chaos. To restrain these demons and ghosts, it would be useless to reason with them. Often, iron and blood methods would be more effective. Bai Changchun was in charge of the demon realm. It seemed that he had killed countless people, but in fact, he had saved more lives. After thinking it through, Yu Qianzhou's fear turned into admiration. Think about it, other soul formation stage cultivators did not want to be tied down by anything, but Bai Changchun abandoned his family and ended up being tied down by this demon realm for nearly 2,000 years. His responsibility was great, and his actions were respectable. Yu Qianzhou was a little depressed. He had racked his brains to obtain the position of punishment envoy, but once he really took it, the burden on his shoulders would be immense. To put it nicely, he would have to shoulder the welfare of all living beings in the world. Whatever, he would get it first. If it didn't work, he would find someone else to take over. Yu Qianzhou thought it through in a blink of an eye. He looked around and asked, Peach Blossom, where is the real body of the old demon hiding? I don't know the specific location, but it must be hidden in the green vines under this stone cliff. Peach Blossom said a little uneasily. I see. Yu Qianzhou frowned. The green vines all looked the same. Who knew which one was under it? Without thinking too much, his figure flashed, and he flew above the green vines on his sword. He released his divine sense to check each place. He believed that this old demon who had cultivated for 1,000 years must be a little different from the other green vines. After checking, he was shocked. As Peach Blossom said, there were stones of different sizes under the green vines. It was probably the result of the half of the stone mountain being shattered. The green vines all grew out of the cracks in the stones. Even if he found the hiding place of the old demon, if it didn't come out, he would really have to spend some effort to dig it out. Starting from the place where the two of them were standing, he swept back and forth with his divine sense. After a few rounds, he found something wrong under the stone wall. At this time, the green vines within a radius of tens of meters grew from one tree. It would be strange if they didn't have such a huge branch. Old demon, get out here. Yu Qianzhou stared down and shouted. The other flying swords that he had put into the storage bag flew out again and danced around him. However, after calling a few times, there was no response from below. Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows. More than a dozen flying swords shot out and slashed at the entangled old vine below. After slashing, he was even more sure that he found the right place. It often took a few slashes to cut off a vine. If it wasn't a demon, ordinary green vines wouldn't be so hard. Alright, you don't want to come out, right? Fine, as long as you don't feel bad, I will cut slowly. Yu Qianzhou chuckled and sent out more than a dozen flying swords. Suddenly, there was a continuous sound of ding dang dang dang. Dozens of flying swords rose and fell and slashed continuously. He was standing in the air watching the show with interest. Suddenly, there was a loud shout from afar. Who is it? How dare you hurt my body? Stop right now. The voice was sharp and anxious. It was a woman's voice. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Did he make a mistake? The flying swords that were slashing wildly below returned to his side. After a while, a figure quickly flew over. He saw an old woman appear in front of him. She was dressed in hemp clothes and looked old. Her hair was tied up with a few green vines and she held a cane in her hand. Who are you? I have no grievances with you. Why did you hurt my body? The old woman pointed at him and shouted angrily. Peach Blossom, who was standing in the distance, saw the old woman coming and quietly retreated into the forest. Yu Qianzhou looked at the vine that had been chopped into a mess and asked doubtfully, You are Tingpa? Since you know it's me, then you are deliberately looking for trouble. Tingpa held the cane in her hand and was about to attack. Yu Qianzhou hurriedly waved his hand and said, It's a misunderstanding. It's definitely a misunderstanding. I didn't do it on purpose. Old woman, you have to avenge me. At this moment, old monster Ting appeared out of nowhere. He raised his palms that had lost all 10 fingers and looked pitiful. Yu Qianqiu looked back and his expression sank. He sneered and said, "Old thing, not hiding anymore?" Ting Po looked at her man's palms and was so angry that her body trembled. "You did it?" "Humph. Old woman, don't be anxious. First, find out who did it. That's right, your man is looking for a concubine outside behind your back. To think that you are still so protective of him. I even brought the victim who was bullied by your husband. Peach Blossom, HM? Peach Blossom?" Yu Qianqiu called out a few times but did not respond. He turned his head and looked around. That female demon had already disappeared. She had actually abandoned him and fled. Yu Qianqiu was not angry. Instead, he sneered and said, "What a little demon who doesn't know what's good for her." He then pointed at old monster Ting and Ting Pe and said, "And you guys, I think you are all tired of living." When Ting Pe heard Yu Qianqiu say that her man was looking for a concubine, she immediately turned her gaze to old monster Ting. However, old monster Ting's eyes flashed. He shouted, "Old woman, what are you hesitating for? Let's work together and kill this little thief." After saying this, he raised his arms. His missing 10 fingers immediately turned into 2 long whips that were as thick as a person's thighs. He ruthlessly smashed them toward Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on his sword. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "Hee hee. Very good. Very good." He immediately dodged to the side. The 2 long whips missed. With a loud bang, the whips smashed the 2 rocks below him into pieces. Then, he shot up like a snake and swept across the sky at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu jumped a few meters from the flying sword. The 2 long whips chased after him and brushed past his feet. The flying sword below him circled around and caught Yu Qianqiu again. Yu Qianqiu flicked his hand and pointed. Sword shadows danced and flashed. Almost 100 flying swords shot toward old monster Tang. Old monster Tang was shocked and withdrew his 2 whips to protect himself. The 2 whips twisted and flicked wildly, immediately knocking away many flying swords. However, there were still many flying swords that passed through. Old monster Tang was so frightened that he cried out. He used his 2 whips as crutches and propped himself up into the sky. Ting Po's eyes flashed. No one knew what she was thinking. She saw that her man was being forced into such a state, but she still did not help. "Go!" Yu Qianqiu lightly shouted with his fingers. The flying swords that were dodged immediately reversed and shot back toward old monster Tang. The latter screamed and dodged in the air. Unfortunately, his speed was slowed down by the 2 huge whips in his hands. A few flying swords still nailed into his thighs. Old monster Tang let out a miserable cry in the air. "Separate!" Yu Qianqiu lightly sang with his fingers again. The flying swords that were nailed into old monster Tang's thighs twisted wildly. They pierced through his thighs and shot in all directions. Old monster Tang let out another miserable cry. One of his thighs was cut off by the flying swords and fell from the sky. A green liquid exploded from the base of his thighs and slowly dripped down in the air. "My leg!" Old monster Tang cried out in sorrow. His arms that had turned into 2 whips went limp. He fell beside Ting Pe and supported himself with one leg. He turned around and shouted angrily, "Stupid old woman, do you really want me to die in front of you? Ah! It's coming again." A group of flying swords circled in the air and shot toward him again. Ting Pe coldly snorted. After all, this was her man. She finally made her move. She swung the vine staff in her hand, and it crashed into the group of flying swords. Ding ding dang dang, sounds rang out. The flying swords were immediately scattered. Then, the vine staff spun around and whistled toward Yu Qianqiu. As for the remaining few flying swords, Ting Po unhurriedly untied the rattan belt around her waist. She raised her hand and shook it. With a whoosh, it turned into a long whip. Ting Po swung it out like a snake and swept it towards the few flying swords that were shooting at her, You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.